Good evening. Welcome to the April 7th Cabarrus County Board of Education work session and public hearing on our budget. I'm going to call this meeting to order and we'll do a quick introduction to the folks here on the dais. We have Caleb Snell, our Teacher of the Year. We have our board member Shannon Lancaster, board member Catherine Moore, board member Sam Treadaway, our superintendent Dr. Kopicki, myself Rob Walter, the board chair, our board vice chair Greg Mills, board member Pam Escobar, board member Melanie Freeman. We have our attorney with us, William Eisenhower, and our board clerk, Lori Furr. Well, so with that, we will move on to our opening ceremony, and today we're just going to do the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you'd please stand and face the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So the first order of business is to set our agenda. That has been available on board docs for the last several days. If we're good with that, I need a motion and a second to adopt our agenda for the evening.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion by Mr. Treadaway.
Second.
Ms. Escobar. Second by Ms. Escobar. Any discussion on our agenda? Okay, with that, let's vote. All in favor of adopting our agenda tonight, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, we've got our agenda set, and actually the first thing on our agenda is to our public hearing for our budget for this fiscal year. And we've asked Mr. Penn to kind of give us a review of the budget before we open it to public comment. So I'm going to ask him to come to the podium. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Dr. Kopicki. I'm going to take you through the full version of the budget for the benefit of those that are attending here live tonight and those that are online as well. So let me begin with just quickly in the agenda, sort of what I intend to cover within this space. So the objectives of the budget, go over a budget policy that governs how we do budgeting, assumptions and background data, and then we'll get into the three major components of the budget. It's our continuation budget, the expansion request that we have, the capital budget, which in and of itself also has three different components, and then remaining key dates going forward that we need to discuss, just so the public's aware of what happens next. So in the space of objectives, we want to make sure that we're creating a budget that continues to support our D25 strategic plan and its successor. Create a budget that realigns the resources where they're needed most. Obviously, when resources are short, you want to make sure you're putting it in the right places. Try and present this budget in a way that makes it accessible to everyone. Be transparent within the budget between what we consider a need and what's a want. This one is important. Do not sacrifice the long term just to solve a short-term need. And then you're going to see that we're going to continue to work aggressively to reduce the number of certified staff that are paid by local funds for the second year in a row. So Board Policy 8100 actually determines how we go through the budgeting process. The black text that's on the slide is the actual language lifted from our policy, and the red text is how we've addressed each of these individual elements, and making sure that we are aligning priorities with this district and the schools. We integrate our requests to the strategic plan and the school improvement plan. Those are requirements from any department or any school that they indicate how it relates to both of those, any requests that they submit to us for the budget. Long-range facilities plans, you see the capital planning process that we go through, in addition to the 10-year capital plan that was presented to the board a few weeks ago. We try to make sure that we're integrating planning into sort of an ongoing basis through the enhanced monthly reporting that we put out there when I got down here for the first time, and the new finance committee that's meeting at the last Thursday of each month now. In addition to that, we continue to make sure that we're communicating with the county where we're able to. Dr. Kopicki and Mr. Walter and I participated in the Board of Commissioners budget retreat that took place at the end of February. Broad participation, I know we checked that box abundantly. We conduct about 60 budget meetings with either school principals or department heads and their respective treasurers as we go through this process. In totality, there's somewhere upwards of 200 people that are involved in this budget. It's not just me or my team, it's a pretty extensive group. Making sure that we're maximizing sources of income. That includes managing cash to make sure we're maximizing the amount of interest income we receive. Making sure now for the first time you'll see sales tax refunds that are budgeted in there as well. And these last two bullet points, frankly, are just ongoing activity. They're not specific to what I would necessarily say limited to the budget cycle. Making sure that we're constantly assessing needs and trying to be as cost effective as we can with the way our taxpayer funds are spent. So in terms of the process, Dr. Kopicki, as the superintendent, sent out in late December the upcoming budget calendar for the 25-26 year. So that was done well in advance of the deadline. We talked about, sort of where we are in budget process to make sure we're preparing that budget and meeting the deadlines no later than May 1st. We're significantly ahead of that because of the needs of the county. So the Finance Committee saw it the first time on March 27th. The full board saw it in the work session a week ago on the 31st. There's a public hearing tonight, and as you'll see later, there's an adoption process later on. We're also going to file a copy in his office. There's a copy in my office. There's plenty of copies online now at this point too for anybody that wants to see it there. As you'll see, our budget hearing is scheduled for tonight. That's what we're conducting right now. And then the adoption meeting hopefully is a week from tonight with Dr. Kopicki and I scheduled to present to the Board of Commissioners. I believe it's 7 p.m. now on April 15th. So with that as preamble in terms of how we address policy, let me go into some of our key assumptions going into this 25-26 budget. We've put in a 3% contingency for what is legislative increases for teachers and other state staff. I know the governor's proposal is significantly higher than that, but for the benefit of the folks hearing it for the first time tonight, I know that all 12 of the largest districts in the state, their CFOs are using 3% for planning purposes. We're trying to get to position allotments that more aggressively reduce the budget impact from locally funded staff. You'll see that in detail on a later slide, and I applaud the efforts of the HR team working alongside finance and the rest of the district leadership to get to that point. In the absence of any other information, we're relying on a Congressional Budget Office, a nonpartisan group, for an inflation rate assumption for 25-26 of 2.3%. We're also looking at the impact from funding in arrears, which the state moved to for the first time this year. And our own internal estimates around growth in student enrollment. And anything that is out there that is one-off in nature, but we know it could have a significant impact. Any of the ongoing litigation, changes in EC funding models that are out there proposed in the legislative cycle right now, things of that nature. Projected enrollment, you'll see on the left historically where we've landed for the end of month 2. At 235, that's where we landed for 24-25 earlier this year. We're projecting to be at the end of month 2, 529. That's an increase of 294 students, or about 0.8%. And you can see we've grown more than 100 students since the beginning of the school year. Now, it's important to point out that due to the timing of how funding works, we're not funded on any of those students, right? Because the state cuts it off at the ADM, average daily membership, which is not your month-end position, it's something less than that, as of month 2, and whatever growth you encounter between the end of month 2 and now, and the rest of the school year, you're eating the cost for. And then on the right-hand side in the box, this is lifted from the capital presentation that I pilfered from Dr. Bowers. You'll see some of the way that our dynamics have changed in terms of student demographics over the last several years and what we see going forward. And along those lines of increasing need, one of the things I point out is the rapid expansion we've had in services that are provided to our EC students. You'll see that since the 2020-2021 year, we've added more than 700 identified EC students. Those students come at a cost at about $9,500 per student currently. And that's in addition to their underlying general education costs. This is specifically for the services that are provided to those students. Below that, I've tried to capture what we specifically receive from the state in terms of funding for those EC students, what we receive from the federal government in terms of ongoing grants that are out there, IDEA being the most important one. And then we had temporary funding that was through the ESSER grant that has gone away for 24-25, and then by extension will also not be there for 25-26, leaving a net unfunded cost outside of those funding streams of $9.8 million. And if you've been following the story that we've been telling this year about this deficit, you know that a big part of that is because of the ongoing costs that we're seeing in the surge in EC-related costs. Okay. As I mentioned a week ago, I wanted to build a slide around risk factors. I mean, frankly, you could put together a slide of probably about 50 different items if you really wanted to. But I try to limit it to the top 4 that have me concerned going into the next budget cycle. Frankly, the timing between the local budget process and the state budget process is out of alignment, right? We're going to have to turn in our homework in a week to the county about what our request is. The legislative session is ongoing. We don't know where that's going to end and exactly what the outcomes of that are going to be. We're continuing to see continued growth in students receiving EC services. There continues to be a scarcity of EC staff. I expect that to continue. To what degree, I can't predict for you. I'm concerned about revenue shortfalls, even with the decreased expectations we have for next year. And frankly, this one's kind of emerged recently, short-term impact of tariffs on purchased goods and services. Now, economics, and I did spend a lot of time on economics going through college in my MBA, what you're seeing is a big disruption in market equilibrium, right? It's the classic supply and demand story that a tariff will cause in that. And the good news is they tend to be short-term until the market equilibrium comes back again. The bad news is we're already starting to see some of the impact of this from some of the vendors that we have out there, where not only is the vendor impacted, but some of their sub-suppliers are being impacted because some of the sub-supply components come from countries that are affected by these tariffs. Now, we don't know the outcome of this, right? There's still a lot of discussion taking place. What's emerging today is that there's a burning desire from a number of countries to negotiate this process, which I think is ultimately where it's going to end up. But I do expect there to be some disruption, frankly, in the market as we go forward. So now to get into the nitty-gritty of what we do for our budget, I'll start with the first component, that's continuation. So for the benefit of those that haven't heard it before, continuation is basically the same staff and services you're providing now. What would it cost you to provide those same staff and services for next year as well? And this lays out sort of the components of that continuation budget, the way the county appropriates it to us. So you'll see what they call instructional services. There's a separate breakout for facilities. There's a separate breakout for technology. I've added in a 4th line here that reflects the contingency for legislative adjustments. That contingency is currently about 4%. That's the 3% I referred to earlier for wage increases, plus an additional percentage point for step movement within our staff, right? So I don't know what the outcome of that's going to be. The governor's proposal is 11% over 2 years, and usually the first year tends to be the higher of the two. If this comes in at 6 and we're requesting 3, that's going to be problematic for us, right? If that's where it ends up. As you work your way through the total here, 105.8 million is the gross change, but then we take out of it other revenue sources that we have as a district. So you'll see fines and forfeitures, interest on our investments, that's really interest on our cash. So that totals 1.2 million. There's also special revenue, and you'll see on a subsequent slide what that special revenue is, and I'm happy to take you through all those 3 pieces. But what's going to emerge out of this is it's not just an expense issue that's driving the 12.7% increase that you see on the page. Revenues actually play a pretty significant part of that. Below the line items, you'll see what we're expecting charter school funding to cost. We're a pass-through, meaning that the county provides the funding for that, and we pay it out specifically to the charter schools as they submit their invoices to us. We have somebody on staff that operates the Special Olympics. It's just the way it's done, but we're trying to make sure in this budget submission that the true cost of that position is fully reflected. And then the last is we maintain some of the parks that we have at $50,000. All 3 of those are really separate of the ongoing costs related specifically to CCS. All right. So why did I spike out revenue? Well, you'll see on the left-hand column what was the anticipated revenue we would receive in 24-25. And you'll see the first line item on there is fines and forfeitures. We got that guidance directly from a member of the county staff. So far this year, we've taken in about $700,000. So I don't think the 2.2 million is reflective of where we should be budgeting going forward. I've reduced that to 900,000. Interest on investments, what we're seeing is that we've got interest rates staying at a level I wasn't expecting them to, but we're going to have declining cash balances to invest, therefore a slight decline there. So overall, about a $1.4 million decrease on those 2. As far as Medicaid reimbursements, we're currently owed over $2 million by the state right now. We do not have predictability around the timing of when we'll receive it, just that we expect to. Problem is, as you budget this stuff out, you have to receive it within 30 days after the end of the fiscal year in order to count it in that fiscal year. So timing becomes critical for us. Minor changes on sales tax refunds and other miscellaneous income. A slight decrease in indirect cost recovery based on the shifts that are eligible for indirect costs within our federal grants. But overall, a $2.8 million drop in our revenue. Now, expressed differently, that would mean that if our expenses grew 0, I would still need a 3.1% increase to offset the drop in revenue, okay? So that's why I say that about 20% of what we're asking for next year is reflective of the need to make up this revenue difference. All right. So then we get into the staffing part of what's in the budget. And this is the certified piece of that. And what you can see is we've got, entering this year, 24-25, about 254 certified positions. Now, I will tell you that anecdotally speaking to my other peer CFOs, that's the highest number I'm aware of, right? And that's reflective of decisions that have been made in the past around impacts to staffing, like program choice and other ones, or some of which we're going to get into tonight, that have driven that number up that high. Now, you may recall that in last year's budget cycle, we took out about 40 positions. We're proposing that we take out another 60 going into 25-26. But the pieces of the components here, frankly, if you look at the very first line, I under budgeted 24-25 for first certified salaries. If you were to back through those numbers, that 7.9 million at 254 staff members only equates to an average of $31,000. That wasn't the right number to use. So I backtracked the error on that, and I'm suggesting that the same number of staff would have costed really 10.6, right? So that's a fix. You then work your way down through the elimination of 60 positions, and let me stress, it's positions, not people, right? There are enough turnover in certified staff over the summer that my HR counterparts feel pretty confident we will be able to do this, turning over between 150 and 170 certified staff every year, that we can do this through attrition, not having to do any RIFs at all, okay? Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Escobar.
Yeah.
Thank you. I recognize it's not people, but I do want to sort of highlight to the county that we are cutting, that we are making sacrifices, that we are trying to be cognizant of the fact that the money has got to come from somewhere. So
Correct.
for people who are listening, while it's not people, what kind of positions, what does this look like at a school? Can you give me a scenario? Or I know it's 60, so you're not going to give me a laundry list, but
Yeah.
can you give me an idea?
Turn it over to my colleague.
Yeah.
So I would say it looks different from place to place. We took a few things into consideration. We had some places, so the state really sets our funding for teachers on that 40-day, the best of the two first 20-day marks. So that 40-day mark for us, we had some places last year, for example, that we decided to hold harmless, that didn't, the schedules were built, the teachers were in place, and that school was just over allotted when we got to that spot. Nothing massive, but in a school system with 45 schools, a handful of positions here and there, a position here and there can add up. So we took that into account and came in a little lower on those places, knowing that we did stay a little overstaffed last year in some places, which had a hit on when we began to look at that fiscal implications of that. So we took a more conservative approach there. We took a look at our demographer came in about 1.5% lower than where we actually, or she was about 1.5% higher than where we actually landed. So we asked her to make an adjustment on her projections on which to account for over the last 4 years or so being about 1.5% short of her projections. So we controlled for that. So I would say our schools are certainly going to feel it, because there are places where we have been able to pad a little bit and make sure that if for example our third grade at one of our elementary schools was close to being at the class size limits, we were able to add another position there. So what we'll be doing this go round is really watching that very carefully and balancing those positions, saying that if we have one school that is slightly under, because we stay in compliance with those K-3 class sizes, but if we have one school that's slightly under and one school that's slightly over, that's probably going to be a human capital move that we'll need to make, that we took into account and just really took a very conservative approach to how are we going to allot our schools this year, knowing that we can make adjustments to be able to account for that.
So is it fair to say the state gives us an allotment based on how many students we have. But if we go over, which is typical of Cabarrus County because we're growing, we still have to pay the staff that's in the building. And so when you say they're locally funded, you're using county dollars because we are not getting them from the state.
Correct.
And so what you're saying
funding
is,
in arrears compounds that problem.
Yes.
so for an example, and again, I don't want to scare any parents, but like for example, a 4th grade class, because we don't have the same restrictions on how many kids could be in a classroom, could have 38 instead of 32
I mean,
or
in
something
reality, in theory, yes. In reality, we didn't allot at that level.
Okay.
Is our 4th grade going to be as low as our 3rd grade? Certainly not.
Okay.
But we would not allot a school at 38. If we saw that that number was there, we would step in at that point and know we need to take a look at our staffing to make sure that we're staffed appropriately.
But we will, when I say we will feel it, like our principals will feel it.
Yes.
Our kids could feel it. Our teachers, I mean, because if you have more kids in a classroom, it's harder work. It's more to do, right?
That's
I
correct.
just am trying to make this clear that we're not sitting here at the county saying we want this money, and we're not thinking about the fact that it's going to take some sacrifice on our end.
That's correct.
I think one of the other things that's important for the public to realize is the way that the state does its allotment formula is based on the totality of all grades across all schools, meaning when they allot for 2nd grade, it's the sum of all the K-8 schools, right? So it's not, you can wind up kicking out something in a school that's a half a position, which has no value, really. So in other words, we don't go school by school with the state to say, okay, I need 3 here in this grade, 4 here in this grade. They say, we're going to take up the total number of 2nd graders you have and base your allotment based on that. So the formula itself has got some defects embedded into it that way. Yeah.
Thank you. And this is to make sure the public understands our budget. So
Yes, sir.
those are appropriate questions.
Yep. Okay. All right. So, okay. The second big bucket of staffing underneath the continuation budget was what we call classified staffing. And again, these are broken out into components the way that the county allots the money to us. So you'll see facilities and maintenance, you'll see technology, and you'll see all other staff. And I've got a few details on that 212 position so people know what that is. Within the proposed budget structure here, though, we are counting a total of 9 vacancies, 8 of which are in the facilities group, 1 of which are IT. The intent is to fill all those vacant positions in next year's budget. Out of that 212, all other, 144 of those are based in schools. That's your treasurers, your data managers, and the personnel that are predominantly in your front office. 68 of those are in central office. So you've got finance members, HR members, directors, and cabinet members. And recall that this is all full-time equivalents, right? It could be pieces of positions that add up to that 212. But recall that even within that 212, even if their position is based here in central office, very high likelihood you've got folks here that spend the majority of their time out in schools, not here actually in this building. Right? So you'll see what's driving that increase: 323 classified staff in total, 517 if you include the certified staff from the slide before. And you'll see out of the county budget ask, 67 million of that is personnel related. It's about 2/3 of the ask, give or take. Right? It then sets up the question, okay, so what comprises the remaining third of the budget ask? And that's when we pivot into what's the non-personnel piece, right? Internally, I joke around about staff versus stuff, right? So, you know, one of the interesting things about this is the level of degree that we go through in reviewing these budgets. You're going to see on these next 2 pages that 11 of these budget lines are decreasing, right? It sort of adds credence to the fact that we do go line by line within each school, within each department, to make sure we're taking out the things that don't make sense, either because we don't need them anymore, they're not effective, or frankly, it was a one-time purchase and we're making sure that we take that back out, right? So just to highlight a few different things on the page here, if you see the computer software and supplies, a $331,000 increase, 150,000 of that is related to VEX licenses for all of our schools. It's a 5-year license that comes up. It happens to be coming up in next year's cycle. The remainder of that is partially a reclass from the line right below that. We've got contracted services going down about 1.1 million. There were a number of one-time expenditures in this year's budget within that line. The fact is we reclassed some of that to software, and we've found alternative funding for some of the rest, so we're able to decrease that line by over $1 million. If you go a little further down the page, you'll see judgments and settlements. We've never actually included that in the budget before, but it's my recommendation that we do so. These are mostly settlements that we've had in the EC space over the years. We've had settlements in 3 consecutive years now. I think 50,000 is very conservative in what that might be, but I want to make sure we're highlighting for the board the need for that and at least getting something down on the page going forward. If you go down to other professional and technical contract services, the $87,000 increase is related to background and drug screening and the costs associated with performing those on a per unit basis. Other textbooks is because we have the CHSI, Cabarrus Health Science Institute, having a senior class for the first time next year. So obviously those kids that are in the senior class will be taking a lot more college-related programming. On the next page, and I'll make sure I spike it out again, there's a related tuition reimbursement for the same reason. The last item on this page is significant in the sense that we made some structural changes in the way that we manage risk here. If you were to roll back about 10 months ago, we discovered that a prior CFO had changed the strategy around risk management to only include in the insurance policies for property depreciated value for all the buildings as opposed to replacement cost. So as a result of that, imagine if you have your car insured, you total your car, and they're only going to give you whatever is book value for the car instead of the cost of actually replacing it. That's the significance of that. Now, as it turned out, 4 months after we made that change, Helene hit, right? So you can imagine what the impact would have been had that storm moved 120 miles to the east of the district if we had left the coverage in place that way. Long story short, the change in the coverage values going from what was about $600 million to about $2.5 billion drove more than a doubling in the property premium. Add on to that, you now have the Helene hit baked into property and casualty rates going forward. If you've renewed your property insurance in your home in any time in the last 4 months, you've probably experienced that personally. What we've been told to expect is about a 10% increase in the rate itself and a 3% increase on property values. So what's reflected in that is the 13% increase on the property that, in addition to what were the changes that we made earlier this year. That is an all-in lines. It's not just the property piece. It includes our cyber insurance coverage, our liability coverage. There are other lines that roll up underneath that. But this is really the first time that we've broken out in the budget this way what the cost of that program has been. When it was sitting there at under $400,000 a year, it's a little bit easier to absorb on some of our other revenues. Frankly, at this price point, it's not. And so it's being broken out separately. So we transition into the next page. You'll see a large increase for electric, water, and sewer. That is largely based on this year's usage and the anticipated rate increases that we've seen that have been filed for at this point. Continue down about halfway through the page, you see a $150,000 increase for supply and materials. That's related to the last year of what we need to purchase for kindergarten play-based learning. And you'll see an associated request in furniture in our capital budget in a few minutes. So the total cost between the two, supplies and furniture, is $300,000. This will be the last year of that need to close this out and get fully operational on that. Again, you'll see the tuition reimbursement line going up $92,000. That's related to the CHSI item I pointed out a few seconds ago. Something we've also never budgeted before is the impact of running the Air Force Junior ROTC program here. We have 8 instructors over 4 buildings that the Department of Defense covers about 50% of their cost, of their salary. Well, the district has absorbed over time the remaining 50%. And as teacher salaries have increased, it now becomes necessary to make sure we break that out in the budget as something that's something that should be included going forward, right? Right. So total increase in the instructional non-personnel at the bottom, about $1.6 million. $1.2 million of that is the property and casualty insurance. Total increase is 6.9%. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about in facilities. Again, these are non-personnel costs. You'll see 3 different lines on here are related. Building maintenance and repairs up $590,000. I changed the title of this line to now say maintenance, repair, and supplies to make it a little more descriptive as opposed to monthly costs. We made that change in our accounting system after the last meeting. Up $110,000. And the last item, all other, up $134,000. All 3 of those are related to the fact that we're performing repairs on our buildings on a rapidly increasing basis. And these are the kind of repairs you cannot defer back. These are repairs that have to happen now. We've run a deficit in the funding in those lines for each of the last 3 years, partially because we've been short funded and had to move money around to be able to cover that, right? Because again, we can't predict when certain things are going to break with any kind of regularity. We just know as the building ages, things are going to become more expensive to repair and more likely to need repair. So what we're proposing is a significant increase within the facilities and maintenance area to make sure we're addressing that. Now, we were asked to provide a breakout of the all other, so you'll see that in the box at the right, totaling that out, and you'll see the biggest line item within that space is, again, the projects that are related to the ongoing maintenance of the buildings at $100,000, okay? We transition quickly into our non-personnel technology piece. The biggest change on this page, the first line item, is our annual computer leases, up $489,000. You may recall that we entered into a new lease. We had one rolling off that was in the $700,000 in this year's budget. The new lease rather is about $1.1 million, and that's what reflective of that change. Computer software, the initial ask was for a $500,000 increase, and obviously we cut that back pretty dramatically and advised Mr. Sane and his team, you got to sort of rationalize the portfolio a bit from where we are right now. We also then broke out in a similar fashion the all other costs of $281,000. You'll see the laundry list of stuff that's in there that makes up that $281,000. The main driver of the change year over year is the last piece on the item, the workshop expense, predominantly related to cybersecurity needs, making sure that we're staying as up to date as we possibly can on defending the network and defending all the computer systems that we have underlie this, right? Okay. All right. So last year at this time we had expansion requests. Now, expansion requests, again, for the definition for people listening, is a truly new. Doesn't exist right now. We want to try to add this to the budget going forward. And the rationale for both of these are sort of related. One is a student safety specialist that tries to address that there's only one person addressing the 24/7 needs of the district in crisis response right now. And then the second one is a psychological services specialist that would assist the coordinator that's there right now. Right now we utilize a psychologist position allotment and then convert it into this services specialist, so which means that's a psychologist that's not in the schools that otherwise could be, right? So we're proposing both of these as new at a cost of a little under $190,000. But that's it. That's the extent of the expansion requests going in for next year. Right. From there we transition into capital. There's three main pieces of capital. Capital outlay, which tend to be smaller items. There's projects between $25,000 and $499,000, and there's projects that are greater than $500,000 that fall into what's called CIP, or the Capital Improvement Plan. And we're going to talk on all three of these. Capital outlay, this is the smaller piece. The county for several years has funded us at that $1,020,000 level for several years now. It is up to the district typically to align how does that $1,020,000 get spent. Historically, this has been done mostly as a central office dominated list, but we're making a proposed change in the way that we do that. As for instance, facilities and maintenance for several cycles now, there's actually a furniture committee that travels out to all the schools at the beginning of the year, roughly 1/4 of them, so we tend to see between 8 and 10 schools a year, assessing the furniture needs. Now, we're not talking classroom furniture, we're talking like front office furniture, pods of activity in like a lab, as it will be. Things that are smaller in nature than a full-scale classroom furniture replacement, but that still have ongoing needs. So we're trying to get into a cycle where we're replacing that on an ongoing basis, and we've developed a system under Mr. Taylor's leadership that actually is working out fairly well for us right now in that regard. You'll see if you go down a little bit further on the list, you'll see a school set aside for various equipment. As I mentioned, this has historically been a central office dominated list, and as we were going through the budget cycle with all of the principals, we started identifying things in their asks that had been there for several years. That's kind of disappointing to hear as a CFO that a principal would come back and ask the same request year after year without seeing funding along those lines. So going forward, what we're proposing is we're going to take $175,600 and address some of those needs. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll point out that they're in your appendix on pages 30 and 31, all the different various line items that are in there. that if the principals haven't seen that yet, they will very soon in terms of when we present to them in a couple of weeks what the budget is, right? But I think we'll make some principals happy in that respect that they are being heard, and that we are providing funding for some of these things, right? So what comes next on capital? And I apologize that this is a bit of an eye chart, but it's busy for a reason. We're tracking currently in the system 804 different projects that are maintenance related across the 12 different disciplines that you see in green at the top, with an estimated value somewhere between $25,000 and $499,000, right? If you scroll down to where we are on the 2025 additions to that list, the additions totaled $34 million, right? So right now we've got 643 projects at $162.4 million. The way that this process is developed, they kind of keep an eye out for the future for when they think things are going to hit, and that's why you see future year projects that are added to this list as well, right? But in totality, 804 different projects, total estimated combined value of $206 million. If you're a believer that each of these projects grow in value at about 3% a year, the average rate of inflation, to put that in common terms, that adds $6 million onto this every year if you change nothing, right? Okay. You've heard that before from Mr. Cohen and his team when they come up and they talk about the growth and cost of construction if it gets deferred out. Maintenance works exactly the same way. Okay. So now we're not proposing that we do all 804 projects at that cost, right? Part of the process is the same team and facilities then comes up with their top 36 projects. Again, 3 across each of the 12 different disciplines. You'll see the year it originally hit the list and then the years at the left. And then you'll see going forward, what they're proposing out at this point. And we're trying to set aside for that 36 projects, $10.1 million in total, right? So that's the summary, sort of at a high level, what the dollar costs are. On the next 2 pages, on pages 23 and 24, are the actual breakouts of each of those projects. And there's a quick summary here in these 2 pages of each of them. You'll see the first 18 projects on the first page, the second 18 on the second page, taking you again to that $10.1 million total. But I will say that there is a much more detailed justification for each of these projects in pages 32 to 35 in the appendix. Okay? Okay. Then we roll into the Capital Improvement Plan, or CIP. This is the kind of stuff that is typically funded by debt issuances by the county, right? That's their typical funding mechanism. So at the top of this list, we have our school construction related items. There's 2 items that are listed on the list. A new elementary school in either the northwest or southwest, at $49.1 million. Now, if you're used to seeing the figure 50.6 associated with the new elementary schools, the reason it's 49.1 is the county actually gave us the initial startup money of $1.5 million in the current year budget cycle, right? So the remainder, in order to complete that 50.6, is the 49.1. The $130 million as the replacement of the high school should be a number you're familiar with from having gone through the capital discussion a few weeks ago. As we go down through the remainder of this list, it's related to equipment maintenance and replacement. So you'll see student Chromebooks, 8,000 devices at a cost of just over $4 million. To highlight for the board and for the public, we did not receive any funding for devices in the current year budget, which is part of the reason we had to go scrambling around to make sure that we had enough devices for students in the current year. Security cameras touches all schools, usually around $850,000 a year for a request. That's for new cameras to cover blind spots that may exist within the schools. Cameras that are broken and need to be replaced. And if you know anything about capturing video, it's expensive from a server perspective in that you need a lot of storage space to capture that video, right? So that's generally what that reflects. Last year, for the first time, we had $1.3 million in the capital request to begin replacing out the outdated TVs and interactive displays that we had. You've probably heard the brand name Promethean boards come up as a result of that conversation. That $1.3 million, I want to say, covered, Carl, 800-ish devices for the Prometheans? Yes, sir. Yeah, right around 800 devices. Reprioritized by school based on what the need was. And then if there was an opportunity to cascade down what was being replaced to another school, we took advantage of that. So in some respects, we're bouncing equipment around a bit from place to place to try to make sure We've got upgraded systems kind of flowing down beyond that 800. But the long-term plan is to make sure we're upgraded to these Promethean boards, which is the next-gen technology in this space, within a period of about 5 or 6 years, is what it will take us. For the last item on the list, and this is the first time it's ever made this list, we're talking about replacing paging and intercom systems in some of the really older schools, right? Where we're starting to see this become a safety issue, where there are parts in the building where the paging and intercom system does not work currently. So again, this is something that we would be on a long-term replacement cycle, and you'll see it. We're proposing 8 different school sites at $100,000 per site. You know, I expect that we will continue to have that item on the list if we're successful for a number of years here as we continue to make our way through that. So total equipment replacement, $6.9 million. The total new construction above that, $179 million. Then we get into what we consider some of the bigger spots on our budget within capital improvement plan, CIP. Right now we are tracking 92 projects with a value of more than $500,000 at a total price of $238.7 million. In a similar exercise, what we did with the smaller ones at below $499,000, we've asked the Facilities and Maintenance Department to prioritize their top 10 going into next year. And you'll see those top 10 projects reflected here. And again, there's a detailed explanation in the appendix on page 37 if you want to reference back to that. But the top 10 for that project, for these projects, is approximately $42.8 million. It's largely the same list that we had last year because we did not get any funding from the county within this particular bucket of money, right? So not much has changed. But if you go back and you take the $179 million related to school construction, just under $7 million related to equipment, and then the $42 million and change related to school maintenance, that's how you come up with the $228.8 million related to CIP. Okay. All right. So then you see that same $228 million. We're total in the total column on the left. Right, the total capital ask is $239.9. That includes the $10 million for the smaller projects, the $1.02 million related to the really small things. Expansion request is $189,000. Continuation request is $101.6. The total funding request, if you include all the capital items, then has become $341.8. Last year, I believe the total that we requested was in the neighborhood of $252 million. The big change year over year is related to the new high school that we proposed in the construction part this year. Okay. So key dates going forward. All right, we're in the public hearing tonight. Late breaking news, they've moved our budget meeting with the county leadership to tomorrow. So that'll be taking place tomorrow instead of Wednesday. County leadership, not commissioners. This is us going and talking to the new county manager, the assistant county manager, their budget team, as we've done for the past several years, right? So the panic there, it's not the commissioners. We then have a budget adoption meeting scheduled for a week from today. And then we do go to present to the Board of Commissioners on the 15th. I believe the scheduled time we picked up was 7 p.m. I saw that in a memo today. So with that, there's a spot in the agenda later for questions on the budget, right? But I
Yeah, I
think
was
it's
just going to say that we do have a item for board members to have discussions and
Yes.
questions during that part of the meeting. This part is our public
yes, sir.
public hearings, so which you've made very clear it's very expensive to operate and maintain our school system, and we do need a partnership with our county to help make that happen.
Okay.
But we are also open to our public. It is your school system, so have an opportunity to share your thoughts on our budget. If you're not able to be here tonight, you can always email the board, and our contact is on the website. But we do have this opportunity for the public to speak, and that's called a public hearing. And to do this officially, we need a motion and a second to open our public hearing. A motion by Mr. Treadaway. Second by Mr. Mills. All in favor of opening our public hearing for public input, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? So we are officially open to public hearing. So we've put out an advertisement on how you can participate. That was essentially asking folks to let us know ahead of time, and we've got 2 people that have and have signed up. So I will go through those names in the order that they signed up. And our first person today is Mr. Bill Barbie. Are you here with us? Mr. Barbie? So you've got 3 minutes to speak to us,
Okay.
sir.
I just had a couple of things that concerned me on the budget. The first one, I missed this slide. It was the supplies, $12,000 for Bethel, $10,000 for Cabarrus Early College Tech, and the early college for a poster maker. Why do they need two instead of just one? And then a speaker replacement, $32,500 for Cox. Where's their booster club? Why ain't they raising this money? This doesn't help a teacher or a student. And then $40,000 for J.N. Robinson for infrastructure for a new speaker. Again, that doesn't help the teachers or the students. This money needs to go to teachers and students. These schools can go out and raise the money themselves, I believe. My next item, which concerned me, was $234,900 for furniture. Do we really need to replace furniture at that price? Is there a scratch on the desk? I don't know, but that seems awful excessive. My next item was $179 million for the new schools. There's already been a lot of money spent for the new Northwest School. I do not think that the tools that are out there for the websites provided by North Carolina are being used correctly. There's already been schools designed. You already have an architect and a builder. All you have to do is go out and maybe get bids from those, redo the blueprints. I don't know, but there's other ways to do this. Which leads me to my next item. You have to go to the county to get these things approved for new schools. Why not combine the construction department with the school board and the county? Let the county do the design and go out and get bids. That would save a lot of time, effort, because you have to go through the commissioners anyway. It looks like you're doing double duty. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to go through the budget. Our next speaker would be Mr. Paul Wanish.
Good evening. Good evening, board members and Dr. Kubicki. I'd like to recognize Mr. Phil Penn for doing an excellent job in managing our funds and the deck that he's presented today that we've reviewed. The first thing I observed was on page 2, material accessible to everyone. And I think, as we heard, there have been meetings going on among the committees. The public weren't invited to, I don't think. So there's some information that I'm guessing got exchanged and the public didn't know, which may be part of the problem. Transparent around what is needed and what is wanted. It is a critical separation that you have to put in there of what's want and what's need. There should be no wants in the capital improvement plan. And I'll talk about that later. The big miss is the lack of what's called the 5 W's. The specifics on who and what are in there, but why is almost always missing. Page 9, contingency for legislative adjustment went from 0 to 2.7 million without any comment on the page, so it was hard to tell what was going on. How can something like this be approved? And special revenue of 3 million shows up for the first time, never mentioned again. At least footnotes for some of these obvious things would help. Page 20 had more money allocated for mobile units than almost the sum of the preceding years, with no real elaboration and no acknowledgement of the non-compliant building codes that need to be immediately remediated. Since 2016, your initial budgets have always been rejected and resubmitted for less money. What happened to all those unsatisfied requirements? Have you reviewed and included anything unsatisfied needs from the past into the subsequent years? Also add funds to comply with policy 33C. Funding for school trips should be in the budget item. This gets me to the capital improvement plan. The layout is critical, and it's 2/3 of your total ask. It definitely needs to say requirements. Commissioners has a statutory obligation to acquire these funds, though they can challenge you to demonstrate your real need. And frankly, it appears you will fail on any of the challenges. There's no real justification in the deck, or I could see in the backup material. You only need new schools when you lack capacity in the current schools to satisfy those needs, or repair costs will exceed the rebuild costs. You should at least report how many classrooms are in use. I expect 1,501 are required, and if you go for 20% headroom, which is under full capacity but what you need for growth, then you're going to need 1,888 rooms in use. Beyond that, how many available classrooms are available for growth? None of that information is available. I expect you to be very close to capacity today. The perfect justification of overcapacity is why you need new schools. Page 7 implies you'll need 2,000 more seats in 5 years, and now's the time you're planning for building. That's a 1% compound growth, that's a 1% growth rate, and I don't see a 1% growth rate in Cabarrus. It seems much higher. Even inflation is 3. If short of classrooms, why close Northwest Cabarrus High School and call it a replacement? The area you see growth, and you need to give up seats there. That doesn't make sense. Why not Cabarrus High School, built at the same time with the same loading factors? I leave you with a proverb. A starving farmer crawls to the king and asks for more food. The king replies, why? The farmer replies, it's obvious. Shortly thereafter, the farmer left with nothing. The farmer's logic was not irrefutable. You have to come in with why you absolutely need capital, and it's the biggest part of your budget. It wasn't there. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Waters. That was all the speakers we had signed up. So with that, we would need a motion to close our public hearing. Motion by Mr. Mills, a second. Do we have a second? Second. By Mr. Treadaway. All in favor of closing our public hearing, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, so we've closed the public hearing portion. We'll get back into our regular work session. And moving on to section 5, which is board chair comments, and I'll be brief on mine. I do want to thank our SRO this evening, Angela Thompson, for being back with us. She is the SRO over there at the Early College and doing great work there. Thank you for being here. A couple of things to be aware of. We had our Finance Committee meeting, and we realized that there was a conflict this month on our typical last Thursday of the month, so we are going to move that to Tuesday, April 29th at 4 p.m., a little bit earlier than normal, but allows everybody to be there. And I also want to remind the public that we have our Legal Affairs Committee. They're going to be meeting this Wednesday at 10 a.m. here in the boardroom, and then they'll be coming to us afterwards at our regular meeting with a recommendation. And then lastly, Ms. Escobar does a wonderful job with our board interns, and it is that time of year for our students. If you're interested in becoming a school board intern, the applications, I think, are online now through the end of the month. That's correct? So it's a whole lot you learn. It's a really great opportunity. Rising seniors and juniors. So rising seniors and juniors, please take advantage of that opportunity. It is a busy time of year. We've got lots going on, everything from proms to award ceremonies to our graduation's coming up, if you could believe that, in just a month. So, but there's still time to finish strong. So if you are students and teachers, please give that final effort, that final push, make it a good year. And with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Kopicki for superintendent comments.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Just a few reminders for our community. We posted our parent engagement survey today, and I would ask all of our parents to take a look at that at the website www.engagewithccs.com and take the 10 to 15 minutes it will require to complete the survey. We would ask you to take a look at this survey and give the parent feedback that is crucial to us, and making sure that we're having a dialogue with our parents, getting the feedback from our parents on our school's learning environment. Your honest feedback is very important to us, and we look forward to looking at those results in the coming months. Reminder to everyone, it is the Assistant Principals Week. We celebrate our assistant principals this week, and we recognize the incredible dedication and leadership that they have as they support the school system and all the people, especially our children, every day. And we would ask everyone, when you see your assistant principal this week, to reach out and commend them for their work and their commitment and the positive impact that they make on the lives of students and staff in our school communities. So if you have a moment, thank your assistant principal in your school this week. Our Youth Art Month Festival is Friday. Cabarrus County Schools will hold that festival at the Gibson Mill Market on Friday, April 11th from 5 to 8 p.m. This is always a great event. We look forward to it, and Mr. Tolbert and all of our teachers throughout the community and our school system put together a fantastic presentation at the Gibson Mill Market with their festival every month. So I would ask you, if you have a moment this weekend on Friday, to stop by there and look at the wonderful artwork that has been displayed here in our lobby over the last couple of weeks. And it's a great time to go and engage with our teachers, our students, and see a lot of the fantastic work that they produce over the course of the year. Another reminder is that our schools will be closed on Friday, April 18th in observance of Good Friday, the Good Friday holiday, and that all students in the traditional schools will be out of school on Monday, April 21st, April 21st for a staff development day. Early colleges will operate as normal on Monday, the 21st. This Saturday is a wonderful time for folks that are looking for employment to check out the CCS job fair. It will be held on Saturday, April 12th from 10 to 12 p.m. at the Winkler Middle School. The doors again will open at 10 o'clock for any prospective employee, and all 44 schools and CCS departments will be on hand to provide information for anyone that wants to take an opportunity to see what is available here in Cabarrus County Schools in terms of employment. I want to thank more than 19,000 parents who have completed the online bus request form for next year in Parent Square. Those forms were shared in a Parent Square post with families on Monday, March 31st. As a reminder, this form must be completed by all families, regardless of whether or not you wish to request a 25-26 bus transportation. The deadline for completing this electronic form in Parent Square will be April 13th. And if you have any questions, please reach out to the assistant principal at your child's school. And finally, our Student and Family Wellness Forum will be conducted on Wednesday, April 23rd from 5 to 7 p.m. at West Cabarrus High School. We're excited to have Chris Herron, a former NBA professional basketball player, as this year's keynote speaker. There will also be a provider fair, including multiple community mental health and wellness partners for students and their families to learn about resources that are available. Additionally, there will be a child watch opportunity for people that need their children to be watched during this event, and we'll have food trucks, a raffle, and giveaways as well. So it's a great opportunity for families to come out, hear a great guest speaker, and to engage in some of the events that are taking place here in Cabarrus County. Thank you, Mr. Walter.
Thank you, Dr. Kapicki. We will move on to section 6, which is a report section. And my first one we've got up is a construction update. We welcome Mr. Brian Cohn to the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Kapicki. This is the construction update, actually for the last couple of months, March and February. It's been since then, since I've been in front of you. We'll start with the Coultram Webb Beverly Hills replacement project. Real quickly, we continue rerouting the clean water storm pipe through the site. What that means is we have quite a bit of off-site water that was previously running through our site that we're required to reroute around. So we are in the process of doing that. The public sanitary sewer work as well, very similar. We had multiple public sanitary sewer lines running through our site. In some instances, actually up underneath the old building. That is a part of this process. We're rerouting now so that it's more manageable and can be maintained better by the City of Concord. We've had multiple brick panel submissions submitted, and we've reviewed those with the City of Concord Planning Department. This is all in conjunction with the work that took place in November of last year with the Historic Preservation Commission and the submission of that brick panel. And we're making sure that what we submitted and what their expectation was for the color and the finish was met. So we've met them on site multiple times, and we've gone through 2 rounds of submissions, and actually last week we did make that final selection that they signed off on. Other areas of the site where we're not working on the piping network system, they're removing topsoil and stripping the sites. Our mock-up panel, which is a really big part of these projects, those elements have started being built. That mock-up panel essentially gives us a look and feel of what the building is going to be in terms of the veneers, the metal siding, the soffits, the windows, the brick veneer. It gives us what we consider a baseline for the expectation with the trade partners on site, so that if there is questions on how something needs to be done, we take them to that mock-up panel and we say, this is what we want, and they understand that expectation. As a part of all the public utility work, City of Concord, their engineering department has been on site regularly because they have to inspect these public systems as we install them, and they have to certify them at the end of the project as well. And the big live oak tree that we protected, we've gone to extreme measures, I would say, and we've built essentially a wall around this tree. If you've ridden by the site, you'll see plywood panels protecting it so that there's no chance of anybody accidentally running through there. If they do, they're going to run through a wall. That image you see there is the beginning of redirecting the spring head that is located on the site. If you don't know, there is a constant spring coming off of Spring Street, runs about 30 to 40 gallons an hour. Is what comes through that site. So we had to reroute this in order to install the new storm pipe network as well as sanitary sewer. And that's the temporary pipe that we put in place in order to reroute that spring head. And then that's the area that we are continually working in, trying to come up. That's the low spot of the site. You can kind of see the tail end of that pipe sticking out down there where they have it rerouted and covered up and are working on the new pipe network now. Just some quick data point updates that we track on a monthly basis. If you remember, we had these same updates as a part of the R. Brown project. You can see that the project itself has been allocated on the baseline schedule for 603 days, and we're about 22% complete. We continue to track our diversity spend on a monthly basis. The goal at the state level is 10%, but Rogers exceeds that, and they fall just below 20% is what our project goal is. And we'll track that on a monthly basis as we go through the project. You can see the materials. That chart gives us kind of a milestone schedule of materials of when the necessary date for delivery is and what the anticipated delivery date is. That helps us to identify on that master schedule. If we see there's a delay, they can adjust it accordingly and see what impacts it has downstream with the other task. Our weather days are tracked as well. We allocate a certain number of weather days for every month. And so we track those, and this past month in March we had 7 days captured. We didn't use any of them, so that's why 7 days are shown. As those days start coming off the actual, that means we got to figure out a day that we can make up, whether that's weekend work or some other time. And then we also continue to have a billing summary on a monthly basis. We get pay applications every month that show all these percentages, but this gives us an easy place to find what that tax summary is, because we have to report that sales tax on a monthly basis as well. That's an updated aerial looking southeast. Downtown Concord you see there in the foreground. That's Grove Street, the old courthouse theater, and Spring Street. That will be the primary entrance for parents and visitors coming into the site. Last week we did, as we were working through some of that storm and sanitary sewer installation, uncovered some pipes unknown to anybody. So we had to push pause, call the City of Concord, because they are public pipes. They were old sand cast water lines that came from City of Concord down to the water plant that was originally at the Clearwater studio. So the City of Concord helped us to realize that they weren't active. We could cap them off, so we removed them, capped them, and carried on. And then, as I mentioned earlier, that's what the mock-up panel looks like. Again, we kind of reiterated to the City of Concord, the planning staff that's tasked with the Historic Preservation Commission, that we'll bring them out on a regular basis as we start building this, and again, gives you a very good visual representation of what the school is going to look like. That's looking towards Franklin and Spring Street. That's the bus entrance there up on the left. Our erosion control pond that we had to put in place, where our future detention pond, or underground detention structure, I should say, will be located. And then again on the left there, you can see where they're coming out of the low part of the site with storm and sanitary. And then this is looking due west. That's Georgia Street in the background there. Franklin Street would be over to your right, and Grove over to your left. As we continue, working through the BIM model, part of the changes, we tried to make some creative adjustments with this project. One of those adjustments we made was in the mechanical room. We felt like we could use that space maybe more as a teaching tool to the children, and we're going to make that space more visible and at the forefront, because that's a fairly public area for all the students coming and going from the cafeteria or the gym. But they'll get to see the infrastructure and the systems that are actually in place, making the climate within the school comfortable, hopefully giving them an understanding that they don't just walk in and it happens. But the models give us the ability to create these spaces, visually see what they're going to look like. We sat down with the principal. They were all incredibly on board, thought this would be a great idea. And then that's our current BIM model rendering that we continue to use for presentations. And that's all I had on Culture Web. Are there any questions?
Board members? Mr. Treadaway?
Are there any concerns about supply chain issues?
Yes, sir, of course. There's concerns across all three projects. So we're, and I'll speak to this in the others, but we're aggressively receiving submittals for review and approval so that we can get those in as soon as possible. And there's more. Oh, yeah, that's.
We lost our presentation. All right, continue on.
Yep. Sorry about this. All right, so we'll move on to Mary Frances Wall. So demolition in the existing wing that we're going to refurbish and reuse for part of the programming for this school is nearly complete. We've relocated our quote project office. Since we had available space, they did not have to mobilize a job site trailer. We're going to use existing classroom space that we have within that school for our monthly meetings. The City of Concord Engineering Department has approved all of our utility permitting, and we've also have received the early grading permit. The clearing and grubbing work, there was minimal on this site, but it's all completed. The site contractor has started mass grading on this site, so the cut and fill operations are well underway. The former boiler and pump room basement area, if those of you that toured that school saw that space, it was left as a part of the demolition because we didn't want to include that because there was a site element that we would have to capture as part of the demo. So it has been collapsed in and started to be filled in. We've made color selections for all the standing seam metal roof and trim pieces that are a part of this project, as well as brick selections. So those are approved and completed. And again, submittals are coming in aggressively to us because of the concern over some price increases with the tariffs, making sure we get them reviewed, approved, and back to the contractor as quickly as possible so they can get them released. And we continue to track a May 2026 completion date for this project as well. And that's an image of the collapsed walls of the boiler and pump room there on the right. And then structural fill going back in place and being tested in 12-inch lifts as we come up out of the ground with it, making sure it's suitable to construct on. There's an aerial view looking down towards the playground area in the existing wing. You can see the basement area over on your right. Multiple areas are being worked on, some removals of old foundations that were not a part of the demo package that's been completed as well. That's looking towards the Hillgrove water plant up the hill, and that's the upper level parking lot there that the bulk of the mass grading cut will be taking place and is being used for any fill operations and slab preparations on this site. That's one of the interior classrooms of the existing wing that has been demoed and will be repurposed for storage, bathrooms, and for pre-K classroom space, as well as some administrative space in there. And that's our updated model with the correct brick colors and metal panel roof colors as well. Any questions on Mary Frances Wall?
Ms. Escobar?
I'm guessing the brick for the new building is going to match the old building?
It is, yes. So we took the samples and we held it up against the existing school and made sure the browns and the reds do match.
And then with these bids that are coming in quickly, is there any way that we can help you with that, or would we need to have any role in that?
No, I mean, as of right now, we're good. I mean, we ask on a weekly basis, you know, do you see anything impactful coming down the road? You know, big things like aluminum storefront, structural miscellaneous steel, the things that we hear within the media, those are the ones that we're most concerned about, which rebar, you know, we're done with that. So we're staying ahead of the curve right now. But again, downstream, you don't know what this is going to have from an impact on materials, as Mr. Penn referenced earlier. So.
Anybody else? All right.
Opportunity School, just real quick. So mass clearing and grubbing, you can see there, is nearly completed. We've got our new detention pond that was a part of the erosion control plan installed, and it will be completed and tied into the existing pond of the PLC. Our erosion control diversion ditches have been installed. One unique thing about this site is it's all private utilities for the most part on site. So Concord Fire just asked if we would retest all of our flows, just verifying that we have enough pressure and flow for the new school itself, which we have adequate readings from that. Again, submittals come in at a feverish pace on these projects. Same process. We review them, we approve them, again back to the design team and the contractor, and they can release. We've also, because we've been blessed with so much property here, we've been able to find suitable areas within the site to mine dirt for structural fill so that we don't have to export or import any dirt. We have the ability to manage all of this within the site, which is the cost-saving measures on the site package. The perimeter silt fencing as well has been installed per the erosion control plan, and we continue to track a May 2026 opening date for this, or completion date, I should say, for this school as well. That's a view looking towards George Liles Parkway and the PLC campus there on your right. That's the multi-purpose basketball court and picnic shelter area. There's the detention pond that's been completed and seeded per the erosion control plan. And then there's a view facing the existing Performance Learning Center campus and how it will connect in to the new campus. Again, updated models showing finish colors for the metal panels and the roof, as well as the brick veneer. And then just an overall aerial model rendering showing the project. And that's all I had. Are there any other questions?
Questions? Looks like you're getting a lot of use out of the drone.
I am. Yes.
Appreciate the update. Appreciate the extra.
All right, thank you.
Extra work, Brian.
Yep.
All right, we'll move on to our next item. This is when the board has asked for some information about the clean classrooms for Carolina kids, and we have Dr. Jonathan Bowers and Mr. Jeffrey Mitchell. Welcome to the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening to you, members of the board, and Dr. Kapicki. Tonight joining me here is Mr. Jeffrey Mitchell. If you haven't met Mr. Mitchell, he is our Director of Risk Management, Environmental Health and Safety for Cabarrus County Schools. Really appreciate his efforts and what he does to really take the lead on certain measures when it comes to informing safety practices across the district and making sure our schools are certainly in a position where they can receive the support that they are needed such that we can avoid any elements associated with risk. Tonight we wanted to present before the board an update on an initiative that's taken place. It's the Clean Classrooms for Carolina Kids. The initiative began actually was funded several years ago, and we're in year one of implementation. So tonight we want to give you a little bit of an overview as to what the program actually entails. I certainly want to discuss the progress that we've made here in Cabarrus County Schools with our efforts in terms of participation. We also want to give you an update on the results that we've obtained thus far, and then obviously answer any questions and tell you the corrective measures that have been taken in situations in which that is warranted. So, a little background on the program in and of itself. In 2023, the state of North Carolina legislatively mandated that all public schools and child care facilities in the state of North Carolina would test for lead in their schools, and also would test for asbestos. Now, this is a multi-year, multi-phase project, so again, none of this was expected to occur within any one given year. But the first phase of implementation involves testing for lead in water. And so again, under Mr. Mitchell's leadership here, we got out in front. We were one of the early adopters here, if you will, with some of our efforts to take advantage of what the program itself offers. The effort itself and the program is really a partnership between the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services and also RTI International. If you're not familiar with RTI International, they're a scientific research institute that is located in the Research Triangle Park, and they really work closely with public schools and public entities to really help inform public policies and measures that certainly are going to provide benefits and advantages for those entities to operate. As I mentioned before, there were some money set aside from this. Most of it came from stimulus money that was part of the American Recovery Plan Act back in 2021. And as long as funding lasts, the state will cover the cost of any corrective measures that need to be taken when it comes to the replacement of fixtures and or other elements within a school. You can see here that the participation is free. It's at no cost to schools themselves, but there is limited availability for that funding. So for any cost to be certainly ushered out from the state in terms of replacing some of the items and equipment we have, that's only available as long as the funds themselves will last. So as we are in phase one, and Mr. Mitchell is going to talk a little bit about what does the testing look like, what are some of the areas in which we're really highlighting, and what have been the results that we've obtained thus far.
Thank you all. So go ahead and just cover some of the places where you can come in contact with lead. So part of that is plumbing pipes, painting, spices and other food additives. Water is obviously what we're testing for right now, soil and dust. In the past, it used to be the soil and dust was the biggest issue, but we also got rid of lead, gasoline back several years ago, back in the 80s, so that kind of brought that down. But then as far as with this program, like he'd mentioned, the original date was May 1st of last year. This past year, we signed up for it. The deadline, due to participation rates from other districts, it actually has pushed to May 1st, so we're about a full year ahead of other participating school districts, and part of that is so we can kind of lock in and ensure that if we have any issues, we can get that funding as opposed to having to ask the school to cover the cost. So the first thing we did is did the webinars, then we to do the training for this program, then we designated a staff member, which I took the lead on that, and then we also worked with some schools, principals, maintenance staff, and various other people in the schools to get an idea of our inventory, submitted the inventory to Clean Water. And from that point, they sent us water samples, or containers for water sampling. And at this point, we have been moving through that to collect samples, and we're kind of finishing up this program. So right now, of 43 eligible schools, we have done 39, so we only have 4 remaining schools left. Of those, we have received 35 samples back. And of those 35 site samples, we did have 8 exceedances, which we did notifications out to the schools. And then kind of just give you a quick breakdown of our schools. We had 19 of 19 schools have been sampled, 7 of 9 middle schools have been sampled, 9 of 10 high schools have been sampled, and then 4 of the 5 non-traditional schools. So again, we're getting close to the end of this program. And again, that's phase 1 for the water side, and we'll be working into the next 2 programs shortly thereafter. So as far as corrective measures go, is whenever we had an issue, the first thing we did was take it out of service immediately. We followed that back with determining what the best use or best way to correct the issue. In some cases, we might have found a little fountain on a sink. Talking with staff did not use that, so in that case, that was an easy one. That was a permanent removal. In other cases, we have submitted the paperwork to the Clean Classrooms or RTI group, received fixtures, received faucets, and replaced those as necessary. And then in some cases, again, if we found something was not used, we could just permanently remove those, take them out of service. So as far as we have some information listed both on my website, the risk management website, and also on maintenance website. So if they go to those locations, they'll see a link for Clean Classrooms. They can go there, click on that, and find the information related to this program. So
Yeah, and to echo Mr. Mitchell's point, certainly one of the things we'll make sure we emphasize, and again, Mr. Mitchell is leading this effort in conjunction with our team. So when we talk about the sampling procedures, in order to maintain that they are consistent, they're valid, and they are reliable based on what we're obtaining, he goes out to each site every time a sample is drawn, works with our facilities team to make sure that we are isolating and locating each of those areas within the building that are required to have a sample drawn, and then submitting those results to the state of North Carolina. So he single-handedly is kind of the guy that is engineering this, and so we appreciate his efforts, because that way we know we're not putting this effort on the backs of the schools. We're now asking individuals to go out and kind of pick and choose where these are taken from. He has an identified list that he provides to the state. Those results, as we said, are submitted. He then would receive them. And in any situation in which we get a result back in which the allowable level is beyond what the state certainly has set as the minimum threshold, we take a corrective measure immediately. And that is done that day. And then there's a notification that certainly we share with our families to make sure that they're informed and they're aware of what is taking place as well. So we coordinate with both the school and with Mr. Furr and the communications team to ensure that that goes out and our stakeholders are aware of what's taking place. And as he mentioned, we set this information up on not only our risk management website, but also our facilities operations website as well, so that the public can go and learn more about the information, the program itself. There are links on there to the results, and there certainly is a who to contact with questions element as well. So again, we will continue to provide updates and give results as they are made available, just so you're informed of our progress until this phase is complete, and then certainly any other phases that would be introduced in subsequent years and in the future. So I'll pause there for any questions you may have.
Board members? Ms. Escobar?
Thank you for the information, and also I think it's good that we're taking care of it as we find it, and it's also good that we're ahead of it so we can get the money from the state. That's important. I'm just going to pass along questions that I received from parents on the soccer field. We were just trying to understand, some schools that we have are old. I mean, we have schools from the 60s, but other schools are from the early 2000s, and it seems like the results aren't necessarily consistent with how old the school is. So I know you can't determine the cause or the reason why it's there, but do you have some hypothesis about why it's showing up in some places that are not that old?
So, I mean, I have looked at it as well, because we do have older schools and we got fairly new schools that had this situation, and you know, I haven't found a common denominator to those things. I mean, we bring in, you know, materials, all our stuff are, you know, certified and stamped, you know, lead-free and everything else. But, you know, with some of this is, I'm not sure, I haven't been able to find a good reason for that. Like I said, I mean, it's just something we come across, and, you know, part of it is we address it. And in many cases, you know, we could try to contribute some of that to possible, you know, not in use type situations where it just sits there for a prolonged amount of time, but I was going to say that doesn't necessarily explain, you know, all cases either. So it's kind of been a bit of a mix, and unfortunately, you know, I don't have a good reason on that.
Yeah, and to offer a little bit more there, in any case in which we've been able to go out and address and remedy the issue at the site in which the sample was taken, let's say for instance a faucet or a fixture or a line, when we resample, it remedies the issue. So obviously it was isolated to that particular component as well. So we do find that to be the case, but yours is a great question. We've certainly looked at it, and it's the rhyme or reason really is, it's hard to predict.
Well, and I think it's important to go back to that we're testing everything. School,
yes,
because
ma'am.
You don't know. And then this is just a numbers question. In my mind, we have 44 schools.
Yes.
Why does it say 43?
So the key word on that was the eligible part. So it's 43 eligible schools, and the reason for that is when we did this, they pulled their list from DPI. And at the time, the Cabarrus Health Science Institute was not built at the time. I did reach out to them to see if we could add that school in, and the answer was it's too new, it's not applicable to this program.
Good catch.
Thanks.
But we will test it.
We can test it separate of the program, correct?
Yes.
So all of our schools will be tested.
They will be, yes, sir,
Correct.
that is correct.
So we are testing, we're going to test the school anyway.
It will
and
be
it's not-
tested, that is correct.
Board member? Mr. Chataway?
I was just wondering, when will we have all of them tested? We're so close
we are
now.
like I said, we're at 39, we've got 4 schools left, so we're looking in about 2 weeks or so, we should be finished, and it's around anywhere from 4 weeks to 8 weeks as far as getting results back. So typically 4 weeks is what it has
Yeah.
been.
Thank you.
Our effort was to complete phase 1 during this academic year.
Dr. Kopicki.
And we'll follow up with the board when it's all done again and come back and report back the full report.
Okay. Did you say you're testing every spigot, every water fountain?
So water fountains, water coolers, faucets, so workrooms, nurse's office sinks. So we just went through, and any place that we looked at and verified that would be a location that somebody would drink from, so kitchen prep sinks, etc.
Dishwashers, those type of things?
Dishwashers, no. So anything like a hand wash sink in a bathroom or a dishwasher or something like that, that was not a part of this program. And there were guidelines put in by the Clean Classrooms Group, or RTI, that specified no hand washing sinks and no outdoor spigots. There's various things that we had a criteria that we had to follow.
Okay, but that's the free program. If we wanted to go above that, we can do that. Or you would make that
Correct.
decision that it's worthwhile.
There would be a funding cost to that, but yes, we could do additional, but I think the purpose was if it's not being consumed, as far as like hand washing, there's not as much concern with there because there's not an impact where you're not consuming it, so on your skin, it's not an issue. So it would be something above and beyond the current program, correct?
Okay, anybody else? All right, thank you very much for your time and for explaining that program to us.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so our next item is our 2025-26 budget recommendation and discussion. And again, this is for our board members to ask their questions, to really understand what we're being asked to approve next week. So now is the time to make sure we have our questions asked. So with that, Mr. Penn, welcome back.
Thank you much. So I think what we're going to do is just, you've obviously heard the presentation a few times now. So we're going to stay on the summary slide here of what the request entails. I'll be happy to take any questions you have tonight. If you have questions that develop after tonight, by all means, email them to me, Dr. Kopicki, and the board chair, so that they have all three have a copy, and I'll try to respond to them as best I can after that. But there's nothing to approve tonight. That happens next week on the 14th.
Okay, board members? Ms. Escobar?
Thanks. Thank you for answering my question when I wasn't supposed to ask a question earlier. I appreciate that, because that was my big one. But for people in the room who are new to this, so we have like 3 buckets,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
When the county commission reviews this, and when you're talking with staff and then eventually with commissioners,
Yeah.
do they treat each bucket separately? Does it hurt us that we're asking for new schools? Just your interpretation of, because we have these 3, I mean, our expansion budget is really small this year, but we still have this huge capital budget. So
Sure.
in your experience with Cabarrus County.
The whopping 1 year I had before this one,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But you also know the history because
I do.
you've studied that.
I do. We had an equally large capital budget request last year, right? I think some of the things that have shifted is what you've seen come out of the LGC discussions earlier this year, right? Naturally, borrowing capacity is probably the biggest limiter, as I understand it, right? In terms of how much new debt that they can take on within the constraint of the existing debt service that they have built into their budget. I've heard that number is about $100 million in the upcoming capital cycle, but that number can shift as interest rates shift. And that $100 million is not necessarily allocated to us. That's the entire county request, right? So sort of recognizing that, the likelihood of $39 million being approved against the $100 million borrowing capacity gives you some sense of where we stand, right? But I would equate that to the same request that we made last year, where the request was equally large, when we had 2 different elementary schools and a number of other capital items that went in there. Our role going into the presentation is to state what the needs are, right? We heard a little bit about that earlier from one of the public comments, is that we got to determine that this is a need that's been based on the research that we've done internally, our projections going forward, what it's going to cost us to continue to operate the schools, and not just operate based on what we know today, but what we see coming down the road. Recognizing that we could be in a capital cycle that takes 2 years to complete, and then add 2 to 3 years onto that for actual construction to take place, means we're looking 4 or 5 years down the road in some of these anticipated needs that we've documented in our capital plan. The money's not fungible, right? Because they're paid for out of different buckets out of the county level. What you typically see in an expansion request or a continuation request is more directly tied to current period tax dollars received, whereas most of what comes out of that capital improvement plan is actually coming from debt borrowings that the county issues. And you can actually go on to the budget document that's on the county website that right now that actually has a pretty good discussion of how they manage capital and what funding sources they use and that type of thing. You know, they're both concerning to me in terms of where we see funding, right? A 1 percentage point reduction in our ask is equivalent to $900,000 that would potentially have to be made up in some other way. From a capital perspective, continuing to move the projects down the road increases their cost, right? For the same reason I said earlier that you're seeing 3% inflation on these, excluding the impact of tariffs, right? So I worry about, unless we're starting to commit to some of these things, what does that mean for the long term? And go back to the comment I made earlier, you know, don't sacrifice the long term by a short term decision. So.
Follow up, the why. We heard about that today. I'm pretty sure that our initial, in the timeline where we talked to the county commission, you guys laid out, and when I say you guys, I mean you and Dr. Kopicki laid out for the commissioners the why, right? We talked about capacity at our schools and things like that. It's not included in this presentation, but it does exist in a previous presentation.
That's correct. The presentation that was done in February, that was a key feature of that, was the long-term capital needs of the district.
Right.
Where we showed a lot more detail around projections around enrollment, facility needs, what I call the 12 box of the top 12 big capital projects, right, that are construction related. Dr. Kopicki, anything you want to add to that from that conversation we had?
Yeah, the why based is just on enrollment alone. We have 8 schools right now that are over 100% capacity in terms of utilization. So
I just remember saying those red dots are people,
Yeah.
and I think I said that to Dr. Bowers, but I know that I've seen it, and I'm just trying to make sure that it's out there, that if people are looking for it, if they're looking for that why, we have it, and I know our county commissioners are aware of that.
Yes.
And then lastly, I will just say that on,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I was just gonna, yeah, so we have the detailed information on that, not only just in the numerical projections, but in our boundary projections, in our GPS mapping projections, in the housing units that are out there, the permits approved, in the various phases. We know all of that, so we have that why covered, I would say extensively well. I meet with Dr. Bowers every week, and that's one of the things he and I go over in great detail. So I can say we can cover that in great detail. The why part of that is easy.
Yeah, and we just want to make sure that county staff, not in this building, but over in the government center, and then also our commissioners understand that as well.
I think that's particularly important now that we have a new county manager coming onto this process for the first time. I agree with you.
Yeah. And then lastly, I would just say thank you for the insurance stuff. I did participate in the legal conference this past week, and one of it was risk management and talking about natural disasters. And I honestly felt a lot better just because I heard our presentation last week and being like, oh, we're covered, because even if half the building gets destroyed by a tornado, that's a lot. I mean, just the displacement, all the things that you have to think about, there's a lot. And 44 schools, anyway, safety is a really important thing to me. I know it is for everyone on this board. The thought of not being able to truly replace a building if something happened is important, that we're paying attention to that and that we budget for that. That's absolutely a need.
As you probably know, for a long part of my career, I worked for a property and casualty insurer, a national one. That was a lightning rod issue for me when I first became aware of how we were doing it.
Thank you, Ms. Escobar. Ms. Freeman?
Okay, we did hear a couple speakers tonight, and I would just ask if there is anything about the questions they asked that we could get back to them with some answers, because that's why they're here.
Sure.
And and this happens all the time, you say it's a need, but then they come back and they don't fund the need, then what would be the criteria for how you would cut the need?
Let me say this, and Dr. Kopicki, please chime in as well. In a budget that's more than 70% staff, a reduction in the budget that we're proposing will likely mean an impact to personnel and to programs.
Okay.
There's no way to really fix that otherwise.
Okay.
The extent to how deep we go with that, I can't answer for you right now.
Yeah.
But remember what I said, that each 1 percentage point of what we're asking is the equivalent of $900,000. If they were to cut it in half for what we're requesting, that's $5.4 million, right? You cannot take $5.4 million out of this proposed budget without impacting staff and programs.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody over on the side? Mr. Treadaway.
Yes, I don't understand accounting, so, but from a third grade level, if Medicaid reimbursements come in a month late, how do you handle that from an accounting perspective? Again, to a third grader.
So 30-day window.
Yep. It's
Which means
after that 30-day window.
It's after the 30-day window. It's going to count for 25, 26, not 24, 25.
So how do you cover that in the previous year?
Correct, which is why we're facing the deficit we will, that I'll be talking to in a few minutes. Yeah.
So, I mean, but fund balance?
Fund balance is a piece of it.
Okay.
Right.
So we've talked about the Medicaid reimbursements and the creative schedule that we get, we receive those. With everything else going on right now, are you anticipating any other types of budgetary snafus as far as timing?
You mean other than the legislative one that I'm concerned about, right? Because
Yes.
Again, we're out of sequence. The way this is,
Well,
I turned in my homework
get
a
that.
week from now.
I guess I'm
Yeah.
primarily thinking from any federal
From a federal
grant.
level. So that's an interesting question, right? And I've spoken before about the fact that we may see the delivery of federal aid change in the way it's sent to us, right? Do I fundamentally think that means a reduction in the aid that we're receiving right now? I don't. IDEA is federally legislative. It would be difficult to change that without act of Congress taking place. Similarly, all the title grants have the same thing. Could they theoretically reduce title funding going forward? Sure. But I go back to the fact that there are a lot of poor communities in red states too, right? So the reality is I continue to expect the title grants and IDEA, which make over the overwhelming bulk of what we receive from the federal government, to continue. It may come to us from a different agency. It may come to us in a different form.
That's my.
Yeah.
I guess that's more of a question. Is
Yeah.
if the funding source or the pass through is
Yeah.
is changed.
Yeah.
I'm worried about delays. I
Dr.
guess.
Dickey wants to add to it.
The biggest issue I'm concerned about, frankly, isn't how it comes to us. It's the loss of technical aptitude. Right now, you've seen a reduction in the staff that are in the Department of Education. Well, the federal government has technical advisors that advise on these grants. So if you have a question around eligibility or use, you have the ability to tap into one of those technical advisors to say, I have a very specific question about the use of this grant. Can you advise me on this? Well, unless that's replicated at a state level, I get concerned about some of that expertise going away. But we have to take a sort of a wait and see to see what happens on these major grant programs. But again, I rely on the fact that they are largely controlled by congressional action.
Thank you.
So the title funds are very something we're keeping an eye on. We'll get the next appropriation from that in the next few months. Between now and the summer, we'll have a general idea of what that appropriation is, and Dr. Roth will report that out to you. As Mr. Penn has pointed out, some of this stuff is federally legislated, so it would take an act of Congress as our understanding of things to be eliminated. And Mr. Eisenhower could probably update and brief us on that at another time. All that being said, that doesn't change the fact that the reduction in some of the funding could occur. And to give an idea, if we lost 10% of our title funding, that would be devastating to our district, because I can tell you that myself and Dr. Roth just sat down over the last 2 weeks and looked at the current title funding allotments into the Title I schools that we have and how we're allotting that and how a lot of the different pieces go into that. All of our Title I funding is assigned to a person. So these are people that we're talking about. This is how we offset some of the costs in the buildings to hire some of our employees. If we were to lose any funding in that source, that's going to impact people, which will then impact programs. So that's something we're keeping our eye on closely to make sure that how it impacts the district. So what I would say is this, kind of what Mr. Penn was saying, I'm not so much worried about what department is overseeing or running it. As I always say to people, I don't know how many people it takes to run the Department of Education. Is it 4,000, is it 3,000, 2,000? That's a debate for others to decide. I don't know that. But I know I need the resources to keep the school up and running and efficient and make sure that our kids are being taken care of. It's the resources that we need. So we will keep a close eye on that. We are watching that closely, and Dr. Roth is as well. So we will keep you updated if that should occur. And if anything legally changes, I will be on the phone with Mr. Eisenhower. He can guide us through it as well.
Thank you, Dr. Kapicki. Anybody? Mrs. Freeman?
Okay, the funding in arrears.
Yes.
If you had a household budget, and this goes to your question, let's put it on a third grade level, something we can understand. If you had a rainy day fund in your household budget, do we have any kind of, when you're talking about these things are delayed and we have funding in arrears, do we have a rainy day fund? Is there a way to maintain that so that we don't fall into the donut hole of the funding in arrears?
So the equivalent of that in our current structure is a fund balance, right? It is pouring right now in terms of using the rainy day fund. I'm very concerned about us draining that reserve in the current year to make up the balance that we have right now between our projected expenses and our projected revenues. And we'll talk about that. There's an agenda item specifically around that. The only way that you generate fund balance is to have a year that you have a surplus. There's no other mechanism. I would have to put something specifically as a line item in the budget for fund balance increase. I don't see that surviving a budgetary process, frankly. So the only way that you get to generate a fund balance and create that reserve is by having a surplus year. And if you recall, not all that long ago, there was direction from county leadership to say your fund balance is too high, you need to work that down. And that's what was done prior to my arrival.
So the question is wait for it, wait for it.
I will complete my part of this process in a week-ish, and I'll be waiting like everybody else for 2 months after that to see the outcome.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Lancaster?
I'm just curious. So, and this popped in my head today when I was thinking about some things. So when we rent out our school facilities to various groups,
Yes,
do we receive that money?
we do.
And what fund does that go into?
Part of that is shared with the schools, part of that is put back into our special revenue, and it's used to offset some of the costs that we have for maintaining the facilities.
And is that a decent amount, or where would that fall in here as far as revenue?
It would show up as other revenue in Fund 8. It doesn't amount to a huge amount per year, but we do recognize that that comes in, and we try to use it in the same vein of maintaining the facilities so that as the facilities are used, we're trying to maintain it the same way.
Right.
Yeah.
The wear and tear.
Exactly.
Also, can you explain to me the field trips? What are we paying? I thought students paid for their own field trips.
Yes, this is something different that we're doing, and field trips may be too much of a broad term. It's just the way, again, it rolls up in our budget. I will follow up with the board on that. I need to go pull the exact detail. I did not pull that for this meeting.
And two more. Travel reimbursement and tuition reimbursement.
Okay. Tuition reimbursement is our early colleges, what we pay the colleges for tuition.
That's what we're paying the community college?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah.
And private.
Yes. Thank you. Okay.
And travel expenses, is that for?
Travel expenses is usually mileage, but I will go back and confirm that
Okay.
for you.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you for all the work you've done with this.
Sure.
Catherine?
When we pay for a position out of local funds,
Yes.
does their benefits also come out of that local funds?
Yes.
Okay. Retirement, health,
Yes. All of it.
all of that?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
it's not just a salary?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I thought I understood.
Anybody else? I had the one question which is related to the fines and forfeitures. County did a budget for that. That is in their budget document from last year. And it says Cabarrus County collects fines, penalties, and forfeitures that belong to public schools. The funds are recorded in a special revenue fund. The amount collected is turned over monthly to Cabarrus County Schools and Kannapolis City Schools based on a per capita percentage of average daily membership for each school, and less payments made for bond, forfeiture, legal fees. And then there's a budget here that says that approved budget was $1,800,000, which was increased by $250,000 to $2,050,000 for this year. So they're nowhere close to that,
Correct.
but yet that was what the budget was.
Correct. I have a memo from county staff
so-
and saved in an email to set the budget for 2.2 million for 24-25.
Well, I hope that is a discussion you're having tomorrow with the staff.
It is, and I have a further update on that when we get to that on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. All right, anything else? Caleb's? Nope. All right, so again, it's critical that we understand what we're voting for and what we're going to be approving or modifying, hopefully approving, and that'll go on to the county commissioners. So that'll be next week. So again, you have a last time to ask questions of Mr. Penn, Dr. Kubicki, to make sure that we understand. And if there is any potential changes, let us know. Again, email me, Dr. Kubicki, Mr. Penn. So with that, we'll move on to that next item, which is 6.04, monthly budget summary and board report.
All right. Okay, so as we've been doing since January, I've been providing the board an update sort of where we stand in the current fiscal year. So again, this is 24-25, not related to the 25-26 discussion. So the latest position that I can share with you is we've improved a bit since the end of February. Highlighting a few specifics, we unexpectedly received an additional allotment of $849,000 for our EC students, certainly good news. We did execute another round of cost-saving measures within the district cabinet level. That resulted in approximately $884,000 worth of savings. Now in that is the savings that we said would occur if the new ALA curriculum was approved, which it was. So this is incremental to the $460,000 in fund balance we did not have to spend on the new curriculum because the price was negotiated down by almost $500,000, right? Forecasted salary and benefit savings. We do this deep dive periodically with my team, and the result of purchase orders being closed out with money still remaining on them resulted in a positive variance of around $500,000. One negative along the way, the amount that we received for reselling the used Apple products came in about $138,000 less than we expected. We did have a budgetary number somewhere north of $300,000 for that, 350-ish. It came in below that. Again, we're trying to project that based on estimates that both the vendor and we are doing on condition. So it's subject to actual review of the devices that were turned over, and there was somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 devices, Carl, in that range? That's right. Yeah, okay. So that's a bad guy, as it were, against the other good guys listed up top. But nevertheless, we've incrementally had recognized about $4.4 million worth of savings against the deficit since the end of January. That puts us at about 8.6 remaining. However, I will tell you that we continue to work the problem. We became aware of $250,000 in additional EC funding that has dropped to us from the state since the time I wrote this memo 2 weeks ago. Actually, could we stay with the prior page, please? In addition to that, we did hear something sort of interesting about the fines and forfeitures. And this was sort of an off-the-cuff comment from one of the county staff members, that they became aware of a software issue within the sheriff's department that may be impacting some of this. Now, it doesn't mean that they all of a sudden have $2 million and they can't figure out how to allocate it, right? I don't know the full extent of that. But it was a kernel of hope as we continue to work through this process for the conversation tomorrow to see, is there something being held up by a software conversion in terms of how they're allocating those funds to the two different schools? Because again, based on what Mr. Walter just read, they have to do it based on number of students between us and CCS to allocate those funds, right? So I expect we'll hear more about that tomorrow and could potentially give an update at the next board meeting on what that entails. But I will tell you that we've received less than $700,000 so far this year versus a budget of $2.2 million, right? So again, that continues to be an ongoing problem. As for the rest of the year, we're continuing to work this problem sort of on a daily basis. My team and I undertake another deep dive on this in about 10 days from now, give or take, with the intention of reporting that back out at the next Finance Committee meeting at the end of this month with the date change as noted earlier. I'm a big believer in a book that I once read called Leading at the Edge, right? And if you know anything about the Shackleton expedition that's based on to Antarctica, it's a failed expedition that they had to figure out how to survive. And there's 10 points of leadership that come out of that book, which I think is fascinating. And it's one that I use with my kids all the time. And the 10th one on that list is my favorite. It's never give up. There's always another move, right? And that's something that I've tried to instill on my staff as we continue to work through these problems to say, you can't give up, just keep working the problem, right? So do I anticipate using a big chunk of our fund balance? Yeah, I do this year to help close some of this. But we'll continue to work the problem. We'll continue to make sure that we're closing out POs. We'll continue to review every requisition as it comes in. With requisition entry, meaning you can't enter requisitions beyond a week from this Thursday. And make sure that all the requisitions that do come in are legitimate and justified given the financial situation that we're in. Keep working the problem, as they say.
Any questions, comments? Ms. Escobar?
I just want to thank you for finding some more money. I'm impressed that you guys are continuing to do it, and I don't know I don't know how specific the sacrifices are from the cabinet level, what they're doing to find it, but if you're thinking of a household income, which is how we relate to this a lot of times, I mean, it's not something to sneeze at. $849,000 is a lot of money. Yes, we still have more to go, but that's a lot of money, so I'm encouraged that every 2 weeks we're sitting here and you're figuring out more. So
we're trying really hard to not impact schools in this process also.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Ms. Lancaster?
So the Apple products, so students use Chromebooks.
Yes, ma'am.
So the Apple products would be faculty and staff computers.
Mostly, yes, and then there are iPads that are used at the lower grade levels.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I appreciate the work that's going into it. I mean, it's obviously, like you said, it's a continuing process, and keep working at it, and thank you for the staff that's doing the same thing.
Okay.
So we will move on to the next section, which is our items for consent or action for next week. So we have about, I think, nine of these items. So we'll go through these, and again, if we ask our questions, if we're all on the same page, we can put that on a consent agenda for next week. Otherwise, if we need more information or we want to put it on action, we can certainly do. Any board member can do that. So with that, we still have Mr. Penn here at the podium, and item 7.01 is the 2024-25 budget amendment number 6.
Yes, sir. So I can just wait 1 second for that memo to come up real quick. Forgive me, I'm realizing the memo as I'm looking at it here should reflect in this first paragraph. It is budget amendment number 6, not budget amendment number 5. Changes in the path month affected funds 1, 2, 3, 4, and 8, and I'll go through the impacts of all of them. In the state public school fund, Fund 1, an overall increase of just over $1 million. Within that, you'll see a increase that we just talked about, that $849,000 for the EC students that dropped to us. Early grade reading proficiency, $225,000, $89,000 that we received for transportation safety equipment, stop arms. Offset in part, they're just internal changes that we made for adjustments of vacancies and the use of ABC transfers at the school level, right? But overall, an increase of $1 million, most of which was EC driven. Within local fund 2, it's an overall increase of $3.2 million. $2.3 million that's related to the ELA curriculum and the board's approval of that vendor at the last meeting. So that reflects the increase in the fund balance appropriation that's associated with that. County released to us the contingency funds that are set aside for charter schools of $1.1 million. Again, we're effectively a pass-through agency. The county gives us the money, the schools invoice us, we pay the invoices against what the county gives us in that purpose. And those are partially offset by just an increase of $231,000 related to some of the ongoing expense conversations that we've been having. Federal Fund 3, it's a net increase of just about $4,000 from final allotments that the state and federal government has given to us. Budget revisions to our current federal grants to reflect that. Capital, Fund 4, it's an increase of almost $1.5 million, predominantly related to money that we received from the state to lease 7 new buses at the cost that's shown there. That's actually the lease cost over 4 years. So what the state wants us to do is they'll give us the indication to create a purchase order for the entire 4 years. They'll cancel 3/4 of the purchase order at the end of this year, but that'll reflect the first year's payment going forward on these newly leased buses, and it's a total of 7 that are here. The other big piece of this is related to the CCHS roof replacement project. I talked about funding mechanisms that we had a conversation with the county with recently. Part of it was a reallocation of existing project money, but there was also almost $400,000 in lottery money that will come into play to finally replace that roof. And I believe you have on the agenda tonight the contract with the vendor to actually do the replacement. We also made minor corrections to the funds that were allotted to us from the county for the new fuel tanks in the amount of about $8,000 and security cameras for $4,000, but those are de minimis relative to the size of the overall capital budget. Special funds, Fund 8, we saw an increase of about $56,000. Mary Frances Wall stabilization grant came into us, and an upward revision in the amount we received to the indirect cost recovery from the federal grants. Remember, indirect cost is we're allowed to charge off a percentage for the things that are not easily measured against those federal grants. So an increase of almost $20,000. All in, all those changes resulted in an overall increase of $5.8 million, taking our estimated budget across all the different funds to $545 million and some change, as indicated there.
Questions about budget amendment number 6? Okay, if we all understand what we've been presented and we're okay with it, I would need consensus for put it on consent agenda or motion or request for an action either. So we have a consent on this side, consent. Looks like we have consensus to put that on the consent agenda for next week.
Terrific.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to our next item, which is 7.02, policies for first read, and these again are being introduced, and we'll have a month to consider those before we'll they would be implemented. So we only have one up here, right? So welcome, Dr. Ward, and podium is yours.
All right. Well, good evening, board members, Dr. Kopicki, and everyone on the dais. We have one policy up for first reading this evening. It is policy 4400. This review came about through the Cabarrus County School social workers as they are reviewing attendance and truancy, which is an area of difficulty right now. It's been very challenging, and so they have asked that we take a look at this policy and have given us some guidance. So the proposed changes there, changing the middle school level definition of excessive absences to align with the elementary levels definition. This change will update our local policy to align. Am I supposed to press this? Where are my people at? What'd you do? This change will update our local policy to align with state statutes. Okay, you can scroll
So
down
what is that new
to letter
definition?
F.
Page 5. It's on page 5.
Page 5.
Page 5. Where does it? Am I doing it? Keep going. One more. There you go. So it reads, at the elementary and middle school levels, 10 or more absences in an academic year are considered excessive. And you can see the cross out there. There was something different there for middle school based on semesters, but our social workers and our school admin. We would like to see that combined so that elementary and middle are the same. And this does align with our state statute.
Okay, board members, comments? Ms. Escobar?
So just to be clear then, you're asking for a reduction because at middle school they were allowed to have more. Okay. And this is not required, this is a request.
This, yeah, it's a district request. But this, the 10 absences does align with state statute. So.
Right, but are we violating state statute with our current middle school if we didn't change this?
I believe that we were. And so we are now in line with state statute.
Mr. Treadaway wants.
I was just going to say, the reality on the ground is it's always been 10 days, forever. I think what we're doing is bringing our policy up to what we're actually doing.
Yep.
Okay, I would just, I'm sorry, I would not want to put this on consent. Can you just, I would just like to clarify that for the next meeting before we vote on it. And I would just say, as a middle school parent, it is different being a middle schooler versus being a elementary school as far as, I was just thinking it today as I took my daughter to the dentist, like the amount of things that I have to take her to. And I recognize that this isn't the problems that you're dealing with, but I just want to know if we're doing something wrong and if on the ground level we're already doing it, that's fine. I just want clarification.
Okay, does everyone else understand what we're being asked for? Did you want to comment, Dr.
Yeah,
Pickett?
so you just mentioned, it's unexcused absences is what we're talking about here. So the law aligns, the law gives you 10 unexcused absences. Once you go beyond 10, it's up to the principal then to follow the necessary steps in terms of truancy. So this would align with the law, and that's kind of what's saying in the statute.
Okay.
Mr. Palmer, is there anything there that's not aligned correctly in terms of the unexcused absences at the high school level?
It's trying to align with compulsory attendance.
Got it, that's okay, just be sure, thank you.
Okay, well, if you have any more questions, feel free to email Dr. Ward. It will be on action for next week.
Sounds good.
So we'll move on to, that was the only one for first read, right? So we have our second read. So these are policies that once approved will become effective as of next Monday, right? So kind of explain those to us again.
Sure thing. So last month we had 6 policies that we brought up for first reading that are now on a second reading. I did not receive any questions, but I will go through them. Second reading. It's on a new document for second reading. That's okay. Second. There you go. There you go. All right, wonderful. So policy 3411 talks about high school final examinations. We talked about changing language to align with school district practice, and we just changed the word shall to may as it talks about aligning with grades with our final exam policy. Any questions there? Okay. 3420 talked about the student promotion and accountability. We changed our language here to align with district practices. We talked about credit recovery and how when students complete credit recovery, they will now receive a numeric grade instead of a pass-fail. And this one actually is going to come up again. It came up in the March 31st PLS update. So we were a little bit ahead of the game, but it's the same type of thing, that credit recovery now in the core classes will be a numeric grade and not a pass-fail. So just so you know that. 4320 talks about tobacco products for students. They gave a new definition of tobacco products and all that entails. So we needed to go ahead and change that. 5026-7250, smoking and tobacco products. It revised again the definition of tobacco products to align with the new definition in state law. Okay. And then we had 2 technical edits where we updated legal references. We did that in both 7130 for licensure and in 9110, use and selection of architects, engineers, surveyors, and construction managers at risk. So those were both technical edits updating legal references.
Okay, and they were presented to us last month. We had a discussion, we approved them on first read. So we have the option of a consent, or you can pull any for action. So I've got a consent over here for all of them. Consent on this side, consent. Okay, looks like those will move on to our consent agenda for next week. Thank you, Dr. Ward.
You're so welcome.
All right, so we now move on to 7.04, which is the Mary Frances Wall tuition increase, and to talk to us about that is Ms. Trina Wenzel. Good to see you.
So I want to talk with you a little bit, just give you a little bit of background about Mary Frances Wall and some requests, since we're all talking about budget tonight. That sounds like a good place for that. Okay, I need next. Okay, thank you. Oh, right one. Okay, thank you. Mary Frances Wall was established in 2010 with kind of the sole purpose at that time was to provide our preschool children with disabilities a opportunity for inclusion. And in case you can see that there is a federal law that mandates that public school systems provide special education services to children beginning at age 3. So this was, we had been providing services, many school districts had, because it was implemented in 1987. So school districts had been providing that service. We were originally housed in another facility. Mary Frances Wall was opened in 2010 with that intent to provide that. The question at that time was, where do we find our typically developing children to provide inclusion? Also, the answer kind of came out of that is, let's try and offer childcare for school system employees to give and that inclusive environment, but also to give our teachers at that time and our employees, not just teachers, but our employees, a benefit that would be, the childcare would be provided at a lower cost. So in 2010, we opened and our tuition was $100 a week. The market rate in Cabarrus County at that time, well, and these are market rate studies that are done by the state, and obviously you can see they're not done every year. So it is kind of when the state decides that they will do a market rate study. At 2007, because that was the most current data we had, the market rate in our county for childcare was $136. So we opened at $100 a week to give our employees that cost reduction. We did not increase our tuition until 2016. And at that time we went up to $125 a week. The market rate in that time was $153 a week. So we were still below the market rate. We have not increased tuition since 2016. So our request is to raise our tuition to $150 a week next school year. The market rate, last market rate study that has been done was done in 2023, and at that time the cost was $261. There is a House bill for a new market rate study to be done by the end of 2026, but this is the most current data. So you can see we're well below the market rate. We would also like to request to move our tuition for 26-27 to $175, the following school year to $200 a week. So for the next 3 years, we would increase by $25 per week. And really, the rationale for that is obviously the cost of supplies, like we've been talking about for everything, impacts down to preschool. So just consumables and furniture, equipment, all of those things, as you know, when you have special education students, equipment for some reason is incredibly higher than for just your typically developing children, because a chair for some students is very different. So that cost is higher. Personnel cost These folks are school district employees, their benefits, all of those things rolls into that package. And trying to keep really that high quality staff. And because our program is a licensed developmental day center, which is under DPI and the Department of Early Education, we have to maintain, and that's one of the things, we have to maintain a 1-to-6 ratio. So our number of employees is much greater. So as you can see, just kind of some of the last factors is, like we said, our last increase was in 2016. We're already at $148 below the market rate. And we really just want to try and kind of maintain and break even. We're not trying to make money by any means. We just really want to try and close that gap in our cost and versus really the revenue that we are really trying to make and sustain the program and really make it healthy. And certainly looking at a new building, that definitely will impact there as well. Questions?
Questions for Mr. Chataway?
This is more of a comment, but I just wanted to echo what, or I guess accentuate what you just said, is that we're comparing apples and okra when we come to these pricing, because you've got special needs kids that have much higher supervision needs, equipment needs,
Right.
everything else. Plus your ratio's different, so
Right.
really that's not even commensurate.
No, exactly, because that market rate is for child care.
Ms. Escobar?
I'm sorry I wasn't able to go to the tour last week, I think it was, or the week before. But I have been there, and I know the great work that you do, and I've heard nothing but good things about the school. I say that because the people we're asking to pay this increase are not going to realistically get a huge pay increase. I mean, we're waiting from the state. So if we're asking staff or teachers specifically to pay this increase, while I know they're getting a bargain, I know it's worth every single penny, I would just ask to move this to action and not on consent. And reason why is I want to give an opportunity for staff, people who would have to pay this. Is it feasible? Is it feasible to do $25 a week over the next 3 years, paying more? Because when you're on a tight budget, $25 a week is a lot. So I recognize that you guys have figured out a way to do this without increasing your costs, and I appreciate that. And I don't think what you're asking for is unreasonable, but that's easy for me to say because I'm not paying it. And I also recognize that they're not going to be able to find what they're getting anywhere else, and they will have to pay a lot more. But even still, if I could pay teachers more, I would, and then we could just pass the cost along. But I just that's what I'm concerned about. So that's why I would just request that it's on action.
I mean, that is $100 a month, so I certainly understand that. Ms. Freeman?
So your teachers are not paid by our teacher budget?
They are.
They are paid.
They are paid.
Okay.
Are you saying their salary rate? Is that what you're asking? Or
I'm asking when you said the cost of things, are we paying for the teachers, or is this cost increase just for the running of the school? Is it paying salaries?
Yes, it will pay salaries.
Okay.
It will assist.
Yeah.
Anyone on this side? Okay, that's been asked to be on action for next week, so we will see it again next week. But thank you very much for the presentation and justification. All right, so our next item is 7.05, approval of the Arts and Letters contract, and we do have Ms. Sarah Reeves with us. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, Superintendent Dr. Kapicki, and board members. Today I'm coming to you just with a simple formality. Specifically, this is the contract agreement for the purchases of the Arts and Letters curriculum, which you voted on in March. This agreement has been reviewed by our legal counsel, and as a formality, I'm asking you to move forward with the purchase, so we kindly ask that this be moved to consent for next week so that we can ensure that the resources are readily available for our teachers prior to the end of the school year.
Okay, we've had time to review the contract. Any comments or questions on it? Ms. Lancaster?
Well, this was the one thing I was worried about with the tariff situation, because I know a lot of our books do come, I think, from Canada in that area. So I know you request the material 60 days prior to delivery date, but we probably need to double check that and just make sure we're not going to be not receiving those in August.
Yes, so that is, it's a great question. I called them today to confirm, and basically they articulated the need for an urgency to move forward with opening the purchase orders, additionally with our financial deadlines. But I think now more than ever, we need to make sure that those orders are in and the materials are in our schools prior to going out on summer break.
On the side. Okay, so we have a request to put it on consent. Do we have consensus? We do on the side? We have consensus here. Okay, so that will be put on our consent agenda for next week.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on. Yeah, come on back, I guess. 7.06, which is the second chance EOG, EOC retest update, and there's some good news here, I hear.
Yes, I spoke too soon. However, we are here this evening to present to you a revised proposal, which Mr. Sane will share with you in just a moment. But we received notification last Wednesday from our North Carolina Department of Education regarding some updates, which will result in some cost savings to us from our local budget. And so we are here tonight to present this to you because the plan will be due prior to our next board meeting schedule. So I just wanted to quickly review with you what it is that we are asking for this evening. So you may have remembered in January, Mr. Sane and I came to you regarding our second chance retest proposal. And specifically, this is something that North Carolina Department of Education gives us the ability to assess non-proficient students and allow them to retest, specifically as an additional opportunity in an end of grade or end of course assessment. And so we shared with you a little bit of the overview of that, but it really was for non-proficient students to be able to have a second chance or opportunity to demonstrate mastery. And typically what we are allowed to do is retest in the areas of math, reading, and science. This year, because science is being renormed, that will not be an available option for our students. And so we did just want to highlight one of the things I would say is that not only from a morale and self-confidence perspective for students is this a wonderful opportunity just to say, hey, listen, if you had a bad day, we're giving you a second opportunity. But additionally, we've actually seen some really great results for our kids, which has resulted when we look at the school accountability model. While it does not count for growth, it does count for proficiency in the district. And we have seen a lot of great gains specifically in our elementary and middle schools with this retesting results. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Mr. Sane to share a little bit about the updates we received last week.
So our previous plan included testing after the school year ended. That has been the traditional format that DPI has encouraged. We were surprised to learn on April the 2nd that they are now offering flexibility to do this retesting during the school year. There are some very obvious tangible benefits to retesting before students go home. Namely, this would eliminate all of our transportation costs associated with transporting students to school for additional days and running every single bus route. It would eliminate the lunch that we would need to provide. It would offer time for teachers in the previous plan, we were going to need to have teachers do this work on teacher work days, and now they can do it during the last few days of school. We would anticipate this would increase not just our participation, but likely our passing rates. Students are going to be taking that assessment. Instead of doing it after the school year has ended, it's going to be a much shorter timeline, and it's going to be done in the classrooms with the teachers that they're familiar with. So we see just a tremendous amount of benefits in moving this up to do so during the school year closes. So our revised proposal would still maintain that same intentional focus on recruiting the most effective teachers based on student achievement measures. The window for retesting would now be that final week of schools instead of waiting until after Memorial Day weekend. All schools would house their own remediation and retesting, and then our district staff would support schools in identifying the students that would most benefit from this proposal.
Questions from board members? Mr. Treadaway.
Have you talked with the principals about the scheduling of this yet?
We have not directly spoken with principals about this, so we did share preemptive plans with testing coordinators of what the logistics of this would look like. We've also met internally with our leveled assistant superintendents to manage communication that will go out tomorrow pending this decision, as well as troubleshooting with some office hours to help them with some of the logistics associated with planning this during the day. We do want to make sure that students are not negatively impacted and missing out on opportunities.
That's the core of my question, I guess.
That's right. So we want to make sure that if there's a celebration, if there's a field day, if there's some event happening to celebrate the end of the year, that students that are asked to retest are not negatively impacted by missing out on that.
Okay, Ms. Escobar.
The other question that I had was related to the remediation or the sort of helping them. There usually was a day where the kids would get sort of tutoring, because some kids just, it freaks them out, like they can't, it's just hard. It's hard taking a standardized test at the end of the year.
That's right.
So I guess in that conversation with the principals, are you going to figure out, I recognize the school's responsible for that, but that's two things. You're both, you need to not just take the test, but you also have to have that sort of special time to prep for it again.
Absolutely. So one of the things that each school is going to do is after we host our webinar with office hours, additionally supporting our building leaders on what this will look like, they actually are going to submit to us their plan, not only for their testing schedule, but their remediation and retest plan as well. So they'll be thinking through, what are the students that are retesting going to do? What are the students that are not retesting going to do? Again, going back to making sure that this does not feel punitive or that students are being left out of end of year activities. Additionally, they'll be building out who is going to be doing the remediation, what resources and time is that going to look like in the schedule, and then of course C&I will continue to provision the resources to help with the remediation as we have done in years past after school.
We are required by NCDPI to offer some remediation before the students retake the test. So many students, sometimes it's just offering them a second opportunity. Sometimes it could be that remediation moves the needle a little bit, but we're required to offer that remediation to all students that do retest.
Okay, Ms. Freeman.
I would think it would benefit the students to be finished and have their summers, period.
Yes.
So with that said, this is a budget night. How much impact will we have on the budget that we would save, I'm assuming?
That's
right?
a great question. So we originally allotted $70,000 when we came to you in January. We did have some concerns with fuel increase, all of those things, but I would say at a minimum $70,000 would be a cost savings to us that we were earmarked for local funding. So this is just another small drop in the bucket to hopefully help with that.
Ms. Lancaster?
I just think it makes sense to get them before they leave for the summer. Why haven't we been doing this before? That kind of thing.
The other thing I will highlight is I think we're also very excited about the new guidance will allow our high school students to be able to retest at the semester mark starting next year. So I think that is a very big win for us as we move forward. So yes, it makes sense, and I think it's what's best for kids. So we're very excited about the guidance.
Anything on that, Caleb? Okay. All right. I always want to make sure you have an opportunity for input. Okay, so with that, we can either put that on our consent agenda or we can add it to action. So I've got consent on this side of the room. Consent or action? Consent? All right, looks like that is moving to consent. Thank you. All right, thank you for the presentation and for the news. So we will move on to our next item, which I have is 7.07 Capital Outlay Camera Server Purchase.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, Dr. Kopicki, and members of the board and community. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm here to present our capital budget justification for upcoming camera and server purchases across the district. I should mention that this has already been budgeted through our capital outlay funds for the 24-25 school year. I'm presenting the justifications and our sole source funding that we use for the camera purchases. This purchase is focused on improving security and long-term efficiency in our schools through a consistent district-wide camera system. So the proposed purchases are part of our approved capital outlay plan. As mentioned, the focus is on upgrading and expanding our existing camera infrastructure to address outdated equipment and increased storage needs. Specifically, the project will focus on purchasing servers to replace aging hardware, servers that will upgrade our undersized security camera servers. We will focus on purchasing cameras for new additions and then replacing outdated existing cameras. To provide some background, I want to mention that many of our schools are still operating with older cameras that have lower image quality and limited reliability. This investment will replace aging cameras and expand coverage in some of those critical areas across campuses. This supports our goal of enhancing school safety and improving our ability to respond to incidents effectively. According to my data, no cameras have been purchased as replacements in the last 4 years. That was the rationale for the capital budget request. Keep in mind that older cameras become cybersecurity risks at end of life once they cease to receive updates. Regarding the servers, obviously all of the cameras need to save for a minimum of 20 days all of the video streams that are coming in, so we need to refresh the old servers and expand our capacity for video storage. Typically a server becomes end of life at around the 5-year mark. Of course, many of these servers are no longer under warranty. I would like for you to consider that when a server goes down that's out of warranty, you could lose every camera that's saving back to that server. So 70, 80, 90 cameras or streams could be pushed onto that one server. This project would additionally add capacity to many of our undersized servers. Since 2014, we've standardized our camera systems using a sole source solution to ensure consistency across all schools. This includes cameras, servers, Orchid software, and then support and maintenance. Before we moved to this sole source option, some schools had up to 3 separate camera systems. Obviously that led to some confusion, potentially delayed service, and then increased costs. We now manage over 4,000 camera streams across our 44 schools on a single platform. This makes maintenance, support, and repair much more efficient. This purchase would refresh or install over 20% of our camera streams and nearly 30% of the servers in our district. The way my predecessor had laid this out was the $850,000 capital budget request for this year, ideally also for next year. When we add up the costs of the entire project to refresh all of our cameras and servers over 10 years, you're looking at about $5 million. This investment represents a large portion of that. Next year would represent the same portion. After that, we would anticipate about $350,000 to $400,000 ongoing. The rationale behind $850,000 was because we had not refreshed cameras again going back to 2021 or so, as far as replacing aging hardware. The full purchase has already been budgeted through capital outlay funds. As I mentioned, no new funding is required. We anticipate long-term savings from reduced maintenance, easier support, and operational efficiencies from using a single vendor. I summarized the financial impact on this slide. It involves purchasing, as I mentioned, some 4-lens cameras that have multiple camera streams in one view, single lens cameras for both indoor use and outdoor use, and then 26 40 terabyte servers. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have regarding the systems we use, the reason for sole sourcing, or specific financial details. Thank you again for your continued support.
Okay, thank you for that presentation and justification. Board members, questions? Mr. Treadaway.
I wanted to, I guess one observation I made when I was doing my numerous interim assignments is that some of the newer schools had the worst systems because the older schools, things had been upfitted. So I guess my point is you couldn't go by the age of the school to understand what their camera system, because they had new when it was you know, a 20-year-old school.
That's fair.
But we were thinking of it as new. So, and also I just want to validate, administrators use this all the time. I mean, it's a part of what is required these days.
Administrators reference this on a regular basis. Obviously, school resource officers use this on a regular basis. We moved to having one source, like I referenced back in 2014. Evidently, before we had that sole source, you can imagine if a camera went down at one school or if 3 cameras went down over here, it was difficult, and it was time. It wasted time and it wasted resources trying to identify which vendor we needed to work on which camera. So moving to the sole source cleaned up a lot of that.
Ms. Escobar.
Thank you. Is there any possibility that the price of these cameras will go down in time because the technology, I recognize that you don't want to just put up a Ring doorbell at a school, but is there, again, I just don't, I mean, we need 850, you know, now, are we going to need that, you know, in the future?
I would not anticipate the price going down. Obviously, I know we've heard about the tariff situations that causes some uncertainty in prices in the near future. I would hazard a guess that the prices will not decrease. What will probably happen is for the same price, you might get a better product, right? You'll get better resolution, you'll get longer storage, you'll get better memory, right? So, yeah, good point. Your iPhone price does not typically go down over time. You're paying the same or more, but for a better quality product. I cannot speak to the history of camera prices over time. I certainly would not guess that in the short term that the prices would go down.
Ms. Freeman.
Are the new our new schools, will this be figured into the price of those, or will this be a line item separate from the building of the schools?
Those are already cameras are already factored into the price and the value of any new builds. Okay. These cameras are specifically to replace or to expand coverage at our existing schools.
Anybody, Ms. Lancaster?
How long is the warranty and what does that include?
I do not have the warranty details right in front of me. I can get back to you on that. I know a typical life cycle for our servers is about 5 years. We tend to expand cameras much longer than that. The big problem with the cameras oftentimes is actually the software component. So once the software stops being updated, it becomes a major cybersecurity risk. Somebody can hack into our network, not just necessarily going through a typical computer, but through a security camera to get into our network, for instance, specifically if it's not supported. So I can get you the warranty details. To be honest, I apologize, I didn't have that in front of me.
Yes. Mr. Mills.
When we're talking about sole sourcing, are we talking about just the hardware platform, or are we locked into a vendor? And if we're locked into a vendor, how does competitive quoting to get the best price on the bids work?
That's a great question. So we are using the same vendor for both the hardware. We have a sole source for the hardware and then a sole source using the Orchid software. We did not look out for competitive bids on this. We asked for a bid, and then I cross-referenced that with other bids across a platform. I'm going to call Mr. Penn. What was the name of that platform?
Tips, right?
So the tips platform offers an ability to cross-reference bids and quotes across other entities. So the bid was competitive both with previous bids that we've gotten from this vendor and then other bids that you could access in the tip system.
Anyone else? I'm also going to ask for it to be on action since there's some information that we could use, and technology changes. I mean, right now, you know, we've gone to cloud storage instead of having to buy all these servers.
That's right.
And I don't know what pricing is for that for us, but maybe there's a potential for savings there. So we'll have that one on action. But thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So next one, 2 more to go. 7.08 Central Cabarrus High School roofing project, and we have Mr. Taylor that's hung out with us. So welcome to the podium. Don't know if you're waiting on the basketball game, but glad you're here.
Thank you, Board. To Dr. Kopicki, I just want to thank you for saving the best for last. So I am excited tonight to tell you that in 22-23, we got the Central Cabarrus roof replacement approved and funded the same year. Unfortunately, it came in well over our anticipated price. However, after 2 years of bidding it out, we finally got it down to a price that we can make work. Tonight, I'm asking you to approve the spending of $2,170,729. That is the funds we have available minus the funds that Mr. Penn was discussing earlier that are coming from the lottery. So once that money comes in and it's passed back to us from the county, I will come back to you and get that $398,000 approved. So it was originally a $3,027,000 contract. We negotiated it down successfully to $2,568,920. We worked really hard on that. I would greatly appreciate you putting this on consent. I have worked on this roof for 11 years now.
All right, comments, questions on this one? Ms. Escobar?
I just want to say thank you. I was able to watch the meeting in which you spoke with the county commission, and I know that they weren't necessarily excited about the idea of doing this because we're talking about possibly putting a new school there, but this is beyond the point, correct? I mean, we need to do this.
So if I may, if you'll indulge me, the 11 years is because we have talked about doing that roof, then talked about replacing the school at least twice, if not 3 times. So we need to put that roof on. It absolutely cannot wait.
And we have funding to do it.
Yes, sir.
All right, we have consent on this side. Consent. All right, that'll be on our consent agenda.
I'd also like to let you know as the board that the Owens Company has held their price for almost a year. Find any other vendor that has done that, and they did that because this is Cabarrus County Schools. Thank you.
Good to know, thank you. All right, so our last item for our consent or action would be our board calendar for next school year starting in July. And big thanks to Lori for helping with matching up dates and kind of making sure there wasn't any conflicts with days off and other things. So she has printed that off for us to review. And I think there's a handout, or do we have it on here? It's on the screen as well. So it's very similar. The only other change that I really saw that we added to the work session for November because there was not a conflict with the election day. But everything else is pretty much the same. So we can either think about that, make some request some changes, or we add it to consent tonight. Either way, we have consent on this side. Consent. Again, you can check your calendars, and if you see something, go ahead, Pam.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask to put on action, not because I don't trust the work that was put into it, but more just I need to digest it more.
Sure.
And compare it to last year. But it looks like it's better because there's fewer of those combined meetings because those meetings are so long. So I appreciate that.
The only combined meeting we have is in July, and I guess that's been tradition because a lot of people take summer vacation. All right, so we will add that one to the action. So that covers our items for tonight, other than where there is a need for a closed session. So let me read the reasons why we need the closed session. We'll need a motion and a second that the board convene in closed session to consult with an attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege pursuant to General Statute 143-318 11A3, including cases involve Catherine Gillage, Kenneth Ray Baker, Carol Kendrick, Otis Bonds, Sandra Ruth Moore, individually as guardian ad litem for EM, Russell Gregory, individual as guardian ad litem for DJG, Cynthia Pertillier, individually as guardian ad litem for DS, I guess, and Laurel Rubel, and to consider confidential personal matters. Sorry for that lengthy one, but do we have a motion and a second for that?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Mills. Do we have a second? By Mr. Treadaway. All in favor to go into closed session, say aye. Aye. Okay. Any opposed? So with that, we will say goodnight to our viewing audience, and we will see you next week. And we'll be taking a 5-minute break before going to closed.